Honorable Mayor and council members, thank you for the opportunity to present to you today, taking time out of your Saturday. The information being presented to you is a result of an all-day work session with the executive management team. Today, I hope to accomplish two objectives. One is to obtain direction from you on the major projects that staff will be pursuing over the next few years. And two, to obtain direction from you on the timelines within which those projects will be pursued. This exercise is not intended to be formal, rather a dialogue about priorities and objectives you as a body would like to establish. Once consensus is reached, it's my intention to place the proposed work plan on an upcoming council agenda for final consideration. So without further ado, I'll get started. The proposed work plan was established with the priorities that you have set in mind, that being economic development and public safety, encouraging high quality growth, prudent fiscal management, improved infrastructure, community quality of life with potential new projects. I don't recall that priority, but employees. The first priority that I would like to highlight is economic development. And as you can tell, there are several projects that are proposed under that priority. So the first item is the evaluation of the Cunningham Industrial Park. If you recall, we'd had some discussions, this was prior to COVID, about identifying Cunningham Park as the next major area for potential development or redevelopment. But before doing so, to give you a sense of what the cost would be for making that area a potential target for economic development, a study was going to be needed to determine what infrastructure was going to be required for that. Whether that would include ranging from improvement of streets, also to look at telecommunication infrastructure. So the initial project is to evaluate Cunningham Industrial Park for economic development purposes. As a part of that, we'd also had a discussion about potentially expanding the park. And that would mean working out an agreement with the neighboring jurisdiction that is abutting that area. And so that's the real intention of this particular proposed study. And my intention as we go along is just to engage any questions about the proposed projects that we've identified that you have, rather than waiting until the end of the presentation. So if you have questions regarding that project, please let me know. If not, I'll move on to the next one.
Okay, we done with this. Okay, question I have is, why would Cunningham Park be of such a high priority? Because I don't see that as being a priority at all. Do we even know who owns most of Cunningham Park?
What we would look at is we don't have a good sense of what the actual business owners are within the park at this point. I think that would be a part of the study, is to identify that. Mostly what we're looking at is the public improvements that could potentially be needed, and whether there is a potential for the city to engage the neighboring jurisdiction in the possible expansion of Cunningham Industrial Park. And if so, what does that mean? I think that there may be an opportunity for both communities to benefit from its expansion, but I would suspect that that the neighboring community will not have an interest in University City annexing that. But I do think that still there's an agreement that can be reached where there is mutual gain.
Okay, because the way I see this, because I'm a third ward councilman and I understand priorities with the development at Olive at 170. For me, the next development project or the next development project should be the 82 to the 8500 block of Olive. That would be the next development project, because we know what that situation is. We know what it looks like. That's the reason, one of the reasons that we addressed Olive and 170 is because of that need and the opportunity that it brought. Well, that wasn't even the worst area of Olive. The worst area of Olive is the 85 through the 8200 block of Olive. That's the worst area. It's a mixture of, it's even worse than what the 8600 block was, because that 8600 block was industrial, was commercial, was a church, was apartments. I mean, it was such a mixture of so much of everything. So now, and we've literally transformed that. But the 82 to the 8500 block of Olive is even worse than that was, because you've got industrial, you've got commercial, you've got a daycare there. It's unbelievable. I don't even know how we even approved a daycare right there in the middle of that. And one of the things that I understand is the daycare have to have a green space. Well, they created this wooded little thing that they padded. It makes absolutely no sense what's happening in the 82 to 8500 block. For me, the priority should be the 82 to the 8500 block of Olive. That should be the next development area, because with Cunningham Park, one of the things, Cunningham Park should be secondary to that, because until we address, we don't know what's going to happen or what we're going to be able to do with Wellston and work with Wellston, because I've been talking to the mayor in Wellston, and he's so off and on, and he doesn't really want to talk, and does talk that he doesn't want to really do anything. He wants to control and do everything the way that he wants to do it. So that might be a problem. But again, the priority for me in reference to development, economic development, is the 82 8500 block of Olive.
As we go through this process, I think one of the things that you'll see is the desire to create a comprehensive economic development plan that's based upon the economic development strategy that you approved. The pursuit of Cunningham Industrial Park and the potential of the 8200 through 8500 block of Olive aren't mutually exclusive. So we could do both. The challenge with the Olive Boulevard development is that, one, typically there are shallow lots, as you know, that makes it more challenging to develop in that area without the acquisition of typically owner-occupied housing, which I'm sure you can appreciate creates its own challenges. But I do think that if that is the consensus of the council to pursue that area, that's something that we could certainly add, but add it knowing that it will be a major challenge.
Well, again, this is informal, so I guess I can just talk. But one of the things we got to understand is that in the next year or so, when the Olive 170 development is filled in, we're going to have to do something with those corners on the 8500 block of Olive. And again, I will simply say this to this council, and I've spoken with my colleague about this. We're not taking any houses on that north side. We're not taking any backyards. So the challenge of those shallow lots is going to be a challenge. I mean, there are plans that we have in our economic development task force that tell us how to address that, because we had that task force make suggestions and recommendations. but we are going to have to do something with those corners in the next 2 years or so when that development is, because, or it will literally look like we really don't care about what we've done. To literally have that gas station and that old restaurant sitting there with this new development. So that's why I think that is the priority, is to address that.
I think that, as you know, we're putting together an economic development division. And so the intention is not to say that we're going to pursue one thing and not pursue another. It's really just to say, you know, should we be looking at Cunningham Industrial Park? And if you don't consider that to be a viable project for us, then we can move on to something else. Cunningham had been discussed prior to COVID, as you know. And so that was one of the reasons that we folded it into what's being proposed now. We do see it as at least the study of it and seeing the viability of it as low-hanging fruit. Because it would be in some ways less of a challenge to potentially develop. But that's up to the mayor and council to decide. We're at this point, we're really just trying to get a better understanding of what do you see as the priorities. I think that our intention is to focus on the Olive Boulevard corridor. It has a plan that's already been established for infrastructure in that area. We hope to revisit that plan and to really create strategies for its execution. But what I suspect, Mayor Pro Tem Smotherson, you're referring to, we're going to need the help of the private sector to develop that area that you've identified.
If I can interject, one of the things I would say to, I think particularly all of us here, is that I think the other two corners, I think based on the knowledge that most of us have as far as the viability now of the development with Olive at 170, I think we recognize that the eastern two corners are likely to be put in play sooner rather than later. So what I would say is I think probably the more appropriate way to approach this is almost what do you want to see on those corners? Because I think that you're going to find that with right now the success of Costco itself and then the other anchors that are likely to be coming in, I think there's going to be a natural bubbling of the land across the street, particularly the corner. I think it may take some time for us to go a couple of blocks east, but unless I'm off on this, I think that the other two corners are likely to come into play pretty soon. And I apologize, I don't necessarily know the depth of those lots versus the rest of them as you go further east. But I do agree with Councilmember Smotherson that this is probably that moment in time that we would like, which is we do have right now, I think the success at Olive and 170. And so moving east is prudent. On Cunningham, I think we've had, what I would say is we've had Cunningham on our list of projects probably the entire time that I've been mayor, and probably the entire time that I've been on council. And I'm not sure that we've found a way yet to expand it. I think it would be great to expand it, but I also don't know the interest of our neighbor. And probably, Gregory, it would be better for us to test that water sooner rather than later. So we kind of just get a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I know that with the plumbing company Crescent moving in, we've also got another, well, wholesale resale, but somewhat industrial use new business in our community. So I don't know what that impacts us in that area. But I think Cunningham expansion, it probably presents some challenges that may be beyond our control that we probably need to find out sooner rather than later if anyone wants to dance or not. Wayne, your lights together. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. Well, if we're doing that, I would tend to agree with Councilman Smotherson and the mayor that in a world of many priorities and finite resources, I would think we might be better served focusing on Olive. I would like to see things happen with Cunningham because I think there is potential there, but I think there are a lot of dynamics to my council colleague and the mayor's point that are outside of our control. And I think Olive, we know it is in play. It's happening. Costco's been wonderful. So I think that's something to address, particularly that south side. The north side does create some challenges, but we have that depressed area that just, I don't mean, well, literally depressed. You have to go down in there, and then there's just this hodgepodge of businesses, and we value them, but it doesn't, there's no order to it. There's no structure to it. There's no purpose or plan. So I think I would agree. Let's always keep Cunningham on the list and an eye out for it. But in a world of finite resources, I don't know if I would personally make that thing.
I think that what we will find as we continue on with the economic development projects that are proposed is the Olive Boulevard is a proposed project. It's just looking more at the infrastructure along Olive Boulevard, which is what we as the city really can control. The development, I think you can control through the planning and zoning process, what type of development occurs there. But the real, investment into that area is going to be made on by the private sector. Now, that's not to say that we won't be aggressively trying to recruit businesses in that area. And one of the reasons that you as a council decided to subsidize the Olive and I-170 markets at Olive and I-170 development was so that you could spur economic development along that Olive Boulevard corridor. So the intention all along has been to enhance that area. And I agree with all of you that I would suspect that that's going to occur simply because of the Costco and certainly the other sub-anchors that will likely be in that area. But we do have a project for Olive also listed as a part of the proposed work plan. If I could take 1 second and have them lower this shade here so I'm not looking into the glare. Thank you. Okay, so for the Cunningham Industrial Park study, what I'm hearing from you is the preference to engage perhaps Wellston to determine if they even have an interest in working with us for the expansion of Cunningham Industrial Park before we pursue a study. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay.
And I would say yes, and just to add to this, and I would actually look to expand all the way to Edsel. I would really like to expand all the way to Plymouth, because that then includes the Wellston Metro Station, but I don't think they would let us do that. But at least up to Edsel, because there is a lot of property that is for sale on that Edsel side of Cunningham Park. And it's just sitting there, just blank. And so that would be, I think, a good investment if we could work out a deal with Wellston all the way to Edsel.
Okay. So the initial step that we'll take is engaging Wellston. And before we pursue a study, we'll circle back with you as a council and get further direction based upon what we learned from Wellston. The next project is assessing land available for development. Lots, update the economic development webpage. Any questions on that or any concerns? Creating an economic development portal webpage that's tied to the above project. Evaluate creating an internship program. That's something that would be headed by myself, Human Resources Director, as well as Deputy City Manager Brooks Smith. Implementing the economic development plan.
Oh,
That's what I-
City Manager Rose, I just had a quick question about the internship program. So this would not be necessarily associated with public safety, so not necessarily the cadet program, but a different type of program, correct?
Right. This is a program that would provide interns throughout the entire organization, economic development being one of those divisions that seems to be good for internships. But we're going to talk about the cadet program once we get to the public safety priority.
And I did see that. And so I'm just curious, what age would these be? College age, young people?
I think that's to be worked out as a part of it. It would be good in some respects to have a high school children being able to participate. The reason for that is to show them what careers are possible within local government.
Okay.
But the intention is for human resources to work with the various departments in identifying, what's going to be a good fit for them. To reestablish the business retention and recruitment program. Any issues or questions on that? The creation of a loop capital improvement program. As you know, we have a lot of infrastructure there, the sidewalks, the trees, the stars, all of that. And there is potentially other capital improvement projects that we could pursue within the Loop Special Business District. So Brooks Smith working with Jessica and Darren Girdler to identify what are the projects that would enhance the LSBD.
If I could, I do think it would be appropriate at some point in time during the earlier part of this year for us to, and I don't know that all of my colleagues have had the opportunity to meet with the new owners of some of the properties, because I think, as everybody knows, two of the largest landowners in the Loop switched hands last year. Both the properties owned by Steve Stone and then several of those owned by Joe Edwards. And so it would probably be good for us to set up a time when the council members could become more familiar, particularly with the folks who bought Steve Stone's properties, because I'm not sure that everyone's had that opportunity. And then we know that WashU bought several of Mr. Edwards' properties. So you've got two new landlords that control a good chunk of the Loop. I think we all recognize that even though many times we have emails coming to us about vacancies in the Loop, it's a bit of a challenge to be told that it's our responsibility when in fact you've got landlords who do have vacancies but are willing to accept those vacancies and not reduce their rates at this time. It's one of those challenges that you have when you have a virtually entirely built out, whether we want to call it downtown or not, built out business district where in fact you have landlords that really have not found the need yet to reduce their rental rates to attract people to come in. Whether that is in fact a result of maybe how the PPP program worked and things like that. I think we all understand that we get plenty of emails about vacancies in the Loop, and we recognize that people want us to do something about it. Yet when you have landlords that aren't that incentivized yet to reduce their rents, your hands are somewhat tied. I do think it's important for us also to gain a better understanding of WashU's plans for those properties. In the past, they have always said that they would continue to pay property taxes on their on those commercial businesses that they own. Yet I think we've had concerns in the past as to whether those taxes were paid. And so I think that's one of those agenda items we need to keep abreast of. And I think the fact that they bought a number of apartments above some of the units causes us all concerns, because in the past, if those have become student housing, there's then been a movement to not pay taxes on those. So to everyone who is watching, I think we all recognize that when those properties come off the tax rolls, those of us that are sitting in this room and who are watching by Zoom are the ones who end up paying those the extra taxes. So with that said, I really think it would be good for us to engage with, and frankly, it wouldn't be a bad idea simply to engage at some point in time, a joint conversation with the LSPD, just to talk about their priorities and ours, because I'm the only liaison back and forth, Gregory, Brooke, and me, and thus it probably wouldn't be a bad idea for us to have that type of an engagement as well. Sorry that I went on for a while. Mr. Hales.
Thanks. Could we maybe look at the cost and what would be involved with essentially giving the loop a deep cleaning, power washing the sidewalks? I think that's one of the comments that I've heard over the last couple of years, is that it's the overall appearance. I think it wouldn't take a great deal to really make it look clean and new. There's obviously a lot of traffic, but I think from a first impression to people, it would make a tremendous difference. And I'd love to know what it would take and cost.
We will get that information for you, as well as establishing another joint meeting between the council and the Loop Special Business District Board.
Just, I would agree with Mr. Hale said about a deep cleaning and kind of dovetail with what the mayor was saying about vacancies. And for us to also look into how we, especially on that high profile area, how we may regulate the vacancies, because if they as they just sit there, is there less traffic? I mean, when my wife and I were walking down the loop and we looked between two buildings, might have had a vacant shop on it. The walkway between it's just filled with stuff. It just looks unsightly. Who is it? Because it's vacant and nobody's there, that this stuff's just piling up? What do we do to monitor and make the vacancies, while vacant, still not detract as much as we can from the appearance of the loop? Because the more I understand the economics that the owners have, and they may decide it's in this market, it's better to let it sit and we can handle no rent for a while. That's fine. That's their choice. But our choice is, when they decide to make that choice, what do we do to not let that impact the folks that are open? Because we've got to keep people wanting to come. And if people are looking, like my wife and I see some, it just doesn't look nice down there. You're cutting your traffic, which then you don't want it to become cyclical. So I would dovetail on that, is what can we do to make sure that those vacancies don't detract even further than just by being vacant? And the other question I had, some of these line items here have implementation, and some of them say fiscal year 23. And if I'm not wrong, we've got about 4 months left.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, are they just going to start in March? And then the question is, is there another box that's not there? When are they done? What's the deadline for them? Because that's, to me, is what we really should be looking for. Are we going to have an economic portal if we implement it in March? Is it going to get done by June? I mean, I'm not saying that that's what it is, but that's kind of what's the expectation when we list the implementation period in the next 4 months.
Mayor, Councilmember McMahon, for some of the projects that are identified here, staff has already started working on them. If you recall, you had previously approved a work plan I believe it was Work Plan 2021 or 2022 that incorporated a number of these projects as well. Some of them we will not be able to get to, so we'll need to make some adjustments, and you'll see that when it comes to you for final consideration. But I do agree that the intention is to provide more frequent updates on how staff is progressing with these projects. So the addition of a column that indicates, status and projected completion date, not just year, but date, is appropriate. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just like to add on to kind of what Steve was saying about certain businesses in the loop that maybe aren't renting their businesses right now. And I think this can apply to Olive as well, and include businesses that are open and running. I think that the city can do better at holding these businesses accountable, whether they have tenants or not. And if they're not keeping their property nice, that affects the other businesses, it affects the people in the city. So I'd like to see more accountability to these businesses to keep the trash off, to keep their businesses looking nice. It's part of what will encourage and invite other businesses to come as well. So, we could also maybe reduce some of our vacancies by keeping things better in that regard.
One of the second presentation to you today will focus on the evolution of code enforcement, and there you'll see where we are looking to restructure how our approach to code enforcement, and to get your direction and on that. But it does, not stealing Dr. Wagner's thunder, but it does propose to really create zones and assign code compliance officers to each of those zones. And I think that having a code compliance officer responsible for a particular area, that being in this case the loop, will put greater emphasis on it and elevate the attention that it receives.
Yes. So under our property maintenance code on the concerns about vacant buildings, if a building or any part of the building is vacant for 90 days, the owner is required to register with the city that vacancy. And then there is a property maintenance code inspection required. So the inspector goes out there, looks at the property, makes sure that it's in compliance with the property maintenance code. And if it's not, that property has to be brought into compliance, even if it's vacant. So the duration of the vacancy, that property should be kept in a good condition. It should be compliant with the code, and that'll be part of the code enforcement, is part of the code enforcement program, and perhaps will be discussed later today.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Next project being proposed is the Olive Boulevard Capital Improvement Program. If you recall, there is a plan that was approved several years ago regarding infrastructure being proposed for Olive Boulevard. So our intention is to move forward with the execution of that strategy that's been developed. And this first step is the creation of a capital improvement program. That'll include whether it is sidewalks, lighting, making improvements if possible to the medians, creating a theme as it relates to vegetation. Is it possible to make it more bike riding and walking friendly? So those are some of the things that we will want to take a look at as a part of the creation of this capital improvement program. And that's where I think government has the opportunity to further entice the private sector to really take a close look at Olive Boulevard for future development.
On that note, do we have any idea if you drive Manchester going out really from about Brentwood all the way through Rock Hill and west, there's really a massive plan redoing the streetscape. And I have to think that the state is doing at least a great deal of it because it's their road. Is there any way to find out from the state kind of what their plans are for, I mean, Olive is not walkable, with the exception basically of at the west end where the development is, where it's completely ADA compliant, but the rest of it as you go east from there is kind of a mess for pedestrians. And I think it's great to do some projects. The other question I had about Olive is there a plan in place long term? Because you have these lamp posts out west, and then you go east and they stop, and then you get across Hanley and they start up again, going to the east. And was there a plan at some point to do that type thing on the whole of Olive?
I believe that the plan that was approved dates back to when Frank Ohlendorf was city manager. That was created, and it's been kind of catch as catch can in the implementation of it. And what I'm proposing is to really create a strategy for its implementation. I think we're in or will be hopefully in a different financial position for economic development because of, in part, the additional revenue that the city will receive as a result of Market at Olive. So we may have an opportunity to expedite the implementation of that infrastructure plan.
Yes, to Council Member Hale's point, what latitude do we have with any projects on Olive, given it is a state road? You've articulated some things. I assume they are in their purview, our purview, or I suspect you would not have mentioned them. Are there other things that we can do on Olive in terms of improvement? Or where do we end and the state begin?
It's a partnership that we must have with the state because that's their right of way ultimately. So whatever we do, we're required to get their approval, which they have been willing to provide, as evident by Market at Olive and the drastic changes that was made there. So it is a partnership, but they've indicated a willingness to work with us. What will be the priorities within that capital improvement program? At this point, I can't say. What I'm proposing, though, is for you to establish those priorities when we bring forward to you what we're proposing to include in the capital improvement program.
Just to follow up on that and the earlier comments about economic development on Olive, are we focusing on the capital improvement project? Is it much like design requirements for any of the buildings that the private sector might want to build? Is that included in this, or is this just the capital improvements of the things we can do ourselves? Because sometimes we get, emails from folks going back to the Olive Boulevard design studies and why aren't we doing what's been in there? I'm sure that's a kickoff point for us to move forward what we've got already on the books. And, people talk about that all the time, but are we engaging with the private sector in a way to talk about what's the reality of what they build and the materials they use compared to what we may desire?
Right. Honorable Mayor, Councilmember McMahon, I think the intention is to ensure what we had discussed the creation of this theme along the Olive Boulevard corridor. And that started with Market at Olive. We'd also talked about the plumbing company that will be coming in and looking at how we can create those bookends and then simply continue that theme throughout the rest of the corridor. So I think it's twofold. Any theme that's created, we would want to ensure that the private sector is adhering to that theme as well, whether it be lighting or if we're requiring them to put in, for example, not saying that we would just as an example, meandering sidewalks. So to make sure that as we develop, that we're also requiring the private sector to complement what we're doing.
So as it relates to Olive, I've heard discussion of this comprehensive plan, an economic development plan that includes Olive, an Olive plan I've heard referenced. Whether I'm accurate exactly on on that or not, it seems like there are a number of plans associated with Olive. Is there energy around some sort of consolidation? So if one were wanting to see comprehensively, here's the plan for Olive from economic development perspective, from a infrastructure improvement, from a design perspective, is there energy around some consolidation? Because I feel like there's a lot of conversation about Olive and a lot of plans that are currently, at least in my view, I could be misinformed, in a disparate state.
Mayor, Councilmember Clay, I believe that's the reason that you've agreed to create this economic development division or department, so that there is a body that understands all of the different parts for economic development, those that are just related to the private sector, those that are only related to the public sector, and those where there is an overlap. So you're right. There's talk of Olive and the economic development strategy that was developed. Now that strategy was developed with the knowledge of these other parts that are out there within the comprehensive plan, for example, and the actual infrastructure, I will say, plan that was put together several years ago. So as these strategies are being developed, they have the knowledge of the other plans that are out there. But the Economic Development Department is the area that will be most knowledgeable about all of the existing plans and ensure that whatever development is occurring is consistent with those plans.
Okay, so would economic development department gets stood up, we should expect from them, within an appropriate time frame, of course, some sort of comprehensive document that lays out, here are all the facets of Olive development, and here's how they all fit together, and here's the synergy created from us.
Sure. I think we could certainly put that report together for you that says Olive Boulevard, and here are all of the different components related to it, so that everyone is clear as to all of the various documents that impact how Olive is intended to develop. Sure.
Thank you.
So I'm just trying to kind of wrap my head around this. So if, like, in terms of a timetable, if there were businesses that said, hey, this area is really becoming dynamic, we want to bring our business here. If we don't have something in place before that starts happening, then we aren't going to have this control that we want, right? So how does that fit into creating this structure in a timely way that we're able to have the control that we want?
We have regulations currently that govern how Olive Boulevard is to be developed. What I'm proposing is, at least for the government portion of that, to try and expedite that development by creating this capital improvement program. And I believe that's what Councilmember Clay is alluding to as well, is what are all of these different, whether it's a strategy, whether it's the comprehensive plan that we have in place, how do all of these components impact the development of Olive Boulevard? And that's a report that I'm happy to say that Deputy City Manager Brooke Smith will be putting together as she is the Director of Economic Development as well. But it is something that we can put together for you to say, here are all the different components and go through those with you if that's what's desired.
Okay, thank you.
I do think as we round this out, I think to all of us, I want to bring up the one issue that we really haven't talked about. And that is that as the markets at Olive matures as it is, I think the question that's going to probably be placed back before Gregory and this council is going to be if someone does start moving towards the east across the street, the bigger the development that the bigger pieces of land that they would like to take down probably means that they're going to be coming back to us and seeing what we want to do to help. So I think everybody just needs to kind of pay attention to, it would be the larger developers would like to come in and probably take more of the property. And then they usually like some help from us. So we kind of need to, I think, always be thinking about that as we hope that that success at Markets at Olive does continue moving east. But I think that's one of those things that I respect having the city manager involved in this, as he's been around the block a few times on this. But I can see that coming back into our laps.
Honorable Mayor, council members, the next project being proposed is also a carryover from the prior work plan, and that's the office space development study. This is an example of a date that may end up changing. We had previously engaged the company, and so we're going to likely need to reschedule that. But the reason it's being presented to you is to confirm that it's still a project that you would like for us to pursue. To determine if there is indeed a market for office space here in University City. We previously talked about the area near I-170 and Delmar. We had talked about also Market at Olive development, that area. Right now, there's no plans for office development in that particular development. And we'd also talked about along Forsyth near the famous bar development. Those are the areas that we were going to initially consider for potential office space development. And we'd also talked about whether there would be a potential for additional office space in the loop. And so today I'm really trying to just get your direction on, is this still a valid project that that you agree we should pursue?
I can't speak for my colleagues, but I would say that based on what looks to me like an overabundance of office space in many markets, and based on the fact that we have more people by working remotely than we've ever had. And it seems to me like the return to the office is much slower than anyone anticipated it would ever be. I'm not sure that I would rank this one in the top 10 of things we want to get done. I think we probably got other priorities that are higher up than this, but I would sure yield to my colleagues who disagree and have a conversation about it.
I do not disagree. I think the office landscape is really uncertain right now and seems to be leaning towards less as opposed to more. So in a world of competing priorities, if resources were infinite, I'd say let's go for it, but they aren't. So understanding that reality, I would say this, in my view, is a lower priority.
Great. Okay. We will remove this as a potential project, see what happens with the economy, and then either circle back with you regarding it or not. Okay. Next item is to facilitate markets at Olive development. That's going to just be ongoing until that project is built out. Building the economic development team. That's with the deputy city manager. And as you know, you have previously agreed to creation of that department. Developing a minority and women entrepreneur program. That is to spur. When you look at economic development, the two options that exist is to either expand the businesses that you have and or to recruit new businesses. And so this would be a part of trying to, in some ways, expand businesses that are within University City, or the opportunity to have businesses within University City. And that would mean that creating, whether it's a sort of incubator program or whether it's simply the creation of seminars, classes for those small businesses within University City that could use greater information on how do you actually operate a business. So that would be a part of that type of entrepreneurship program. And perhaps the sharing of resources. So marrying two businesses together where, you know, a business needs someone to answer the phones, but maybe they can't afford an individual all by themselves. Same business, a different type of business may need the same thing. So is it possible to marry those businesses together to share resources for secretarial purposes? So that is just some of the ideas behind the creation of an entrepreneurship type program. And is that something that you as a council believe the city should be engaged in?
I would wholeheartedly say yes. I was very excited to see this. And I think there are a number of organizations that do this type of work. So I think conceivably the city could maybe play more of a facilitator than actually having to administer anything, which I think would be a prudent use of, again, finite resources. So certainly, you know, understanding, you know, my role as a council person would love to be involved in an appropriate way, because this is, in full disclosure, part of what I do professionally. So I have a lot of connections that I think might be able to assist in a program like this.
I also think this sounds like a great program. The one thing I just kind of like to add is that from my assessment, if we're giving public funds to, say, private businesses to be a part of this, I think that we should have, you know, some kind of follow-up to make sure that not only that the funds are being used for what we ask them to be used for, but also that it's an effective program and that the training is increasing the participants' ability to act in a bigger market, you know, to have those skills, and that those skills are actually working.
For all of the projects that you approved as a part of this work plan, the final plan, the final project will come back to you for adoption. So you will provide input into how we develop each of these projects into the future. Today, it's just to get a sense of, are these the major projects that you want us pursuing?
Quick question. On this subject, and I'm just kind of a little confused in that I don't have a problem with developed minority and women entrepreneur programs, but to what end? And what I mean by that is, are we developing these programs because we're using public money to establish businesses here? And then if to that end to establish businesses here, where would that be? Where would that be done? You know, where would their businesses be established? Where would we place them? I mean, again, I'm just trying to understand to what end would we be doing that?
Mayor Pro Tem Smotherson, that would be a part of the development, the creation of this program, as you as a council would make those decisions. I can tell you that we have, as you know, a number of small businesses already within University City that could likely benefit from this program, especially many that, I won't say many, but some that are in the loop and some that are along Olive Boulevard corridor as well. So it's in part to lessen the likeliness of businesses failing if we can. And then the other, as I see it today, goal would be to spur new businesses. But there could be other objectives that a program like this would achieve.
As a concept, I really like the concept. I would say I'm not wild about how city resources would tie into this. I would also say that I think this is a great concept for a neighbor like Wash U to jump in and get involved and use some of their resources to give back to this community. I think they have incredible resources, and I think that would be an angle I'd really like to explore.
Any other questions on this one? Update the list of city-owned property inventory. That's a part of the creation of the economic development program for us. Excuse me, is to identify those properties that are available, work with the property owners in better marketing those properties. A great example is, those that are in the loop that are vacant, to work with those property owners to try and help them in marketing those properties. Also, what properties do we as a city own that could potentially be used for economic development. The one that comes to mind is certainly on Olive Boulevard and Midland. It's probably going to be the next one that we'll take a very close look at. Are there any other questions for the economic development priority?
I wanted to add one more thing before we leave this subject, and that is the word control. I think the mayor was absolutely right in that the market at Olive is going to attract other businesses and private industry and to come in and hopefully develop the eastern end of, or that eastern side of Market at Olive. But in the meantime, I think that one of the things that this council needs to start looking at and understand is that we need to somehow be able to take control. And when I say control, that north side, the shallow side of Olive, the 85 to 8200 block, what's happening there is just a mosh of just different businesses. But you've got these owners that are bringing in businesses. Again, we're getting the rejects from Overland Plaza's development, because that check cashing place that came over here was in Overland Plaza and got kicked out of Overland Plaza. But see, we're not controlling what's happening on Olive. So we're waiting on a private company or private industry to come in and look at that eastern side. But in the meantime, we're just going to sit and let just anything happen to us. We recently last year approved the cleaners company to just create a warehouse right on Olive. I mean, it's incredible. This wouldn't happen any place else. It wouldn't happen in Olivet. It wouldn't happen in Creve Coeur. But here we are allowing a great commercial area to just be done any way that they want to do it. And I'll give you one more example. And this is an issue that I brought up to Mr. Rose and I've talked to my colleague about. Also on that north side of the street, There isn't, and I'm just going to tell you flat out, there is not adequate parking for those businesses. Again, you have a restaurant that sits right on the corner of Grant and Olive. And anytime that they have a full house of customers, those cars are probably illegally parked on the street and illegally parked around that building because they park right in front of the front door, literally, because there is not adequate parking for any of those businesses. And here we are looking at, we're allowing them to put businesses in there and they don't have adequate parking. I'm just telling you. I'm not even sure how even, and the only reason that Food Long can exist the way it does is because the other businesses there in that bill, I'm not even sure if that's even legal. And that needs to be looked at. But so the bottom line is control. What do we do between now and the time that somebody comes in to privately develop that? And we really need to start looking at controlling what's happening on those blocks because we're allowing any and everything to happen right now.
Honorable Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Smothers, the council as a body controls development through your zoning codes and through your comprehensive plan. And you are sort of in a pickle in some ways because you are required to accept what other councils may have agreed to that you had nothing to do with. And so as a part of that, though, if you decide as a body, we don't like this development. We've decided that we have too much of this, or we simply don't like these type of businesses. You control that through your zoning laws and through your comprehensive plan. And so what I would encourage you to do is to, look very closely when that comprehensive plan comes before you for consideration. There will be a follow-up project that I believe is included in this work plan, which is the changing of the zoning code to match that comprehensive plan as it comes forward. So that's how you control what development happens or does not happen. Other questions? Mayor, before I move on to the public safety priority, if it is appropriate, I'd like to take a 10-minute break and then return.
Go. Rajay, are we good to go? Thank you. Mr. Rose.
Honorable Mayor and council members, the next priority that I would like to discuss with you is public safety. The first project being proposed up under public safety is the evaluation of the CAD system software update for eventual purchase. And that's related to both police and fire. And I believe CAD stands for computer aided dispatch, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. And so the intent is to improve or enhance our dispatching efforts. Any questions on that before I move on? Next project is identify site for police and fire satellite facility development. As you know, we are developing towards the west area at this point. The Market and Olive development is one, but it's likely that there will be others. And so having some sort of satellite facility in that area is what we would like to explore.
So is this synonymous with a substation?
Honorable Mayor and Councilmember Clay, if police chief, I don't know that it's a blown out substation the way you might envision, but I'll let Chief Hampton address that issue for you. Chief.
Good morning. I'm sorry for my voice. Try to project as loud as I can. And you're asking Councilmember Clay, is this a substation? This is more a satellite facility for combined resources for all public safety. So within the substation model, it was more of a law enforcement model of that understanding that we're trying to reallocate and purposize, I guess, the staffing or the manpower needed for the community as it continues to grow within this facility. And we're specifically talking about even the Olive Market with the business plans and the strategic plans of providing business patrols, hotel type of business patrols. These bring on new challenges for not only public safety and criminal justice, but public safety and in overall EMS and fire situations as well. If that answers the question, sir.
Okay, I just really wanted to say that I think that this actually should be a lower priority in that until we figure out and know exactly where our police station is going to be and how that's going to be. I think that would actually be a lower priority because I think, and I know my colleagues may not agree with this, this may just simply be my opinion in that until the police station is settled and that is taken care of, then we should not even be looking at what the satellite station until that's settled. And I know this is a combined site for police and fire, but again, until we decide and actually put in place what our police station is going to be, then I think that this is a lower priority issue.
Honorable Mayor, Councilmember Pro Tem and Mayor Pro Tem Smotherson, I do understand, do agree. These were things that were identified well within the time frame of the police station that was due to be built at a certain time. So we will take that in consideration with Mr. Rose as well. But no, we do understand that priority.
But I kind of would like to maybe correct the record unless my colleagues are going to educate me on this. I think the location of the police station's already been voted on and decided. It may be a construction plan that we're thinking about, but I don't believe there's any question as to where the location of the police station is based on previous actions by this council. Am I incorrect on that?
No, I understand that. I definitely understand that. But
Well, that's not what you said.
No,
That is
I
not at all
understand
what you
that.
said.
Sure, but you know, I'm simply stating that until we decide, because again, we just got that report about, instead of it to 23 million to 34 million, but I'm simply stating that until that is decided and done, I wouldn't even consider a satellite station or anything until that has.
But
And
what,
then again, and I said, this is just simply my opinion. I understand what's out there and I understand what's on the table. But I also understand that we just had a flood. And that flood literally wiped out everything. So now we are trying to gain and regain what we've lost. And I think what we've lost is a critical issue. That's all. And again, I already know what's on the table. I just would like to make sure that that is a done deal and settled, and our police station is going to be up and running before we actually even consider a satellite. That's all.
well, I agree with the idea that the police station needs to be moved forward. I think we all do as best we can with the cost. I just want to make sure that we're not trying to add any level of confusion to those people who are watching that some decision hasn't been made, because it has been. Mr. Hales.
Thank you. Since we're on the police, this is not related to that. In a prior year strategic project list, we had on there computer terminals for all the police cars, printers in all the police cars, and that was executed and I believe occurred. And I understand, I think we had 6 police cars that were lost in the flooding. But just this weekend, I saw a car was ticketed in my neighborhood because it had expired tags. And I appreciate whoever took the time to do that. But it was written on a carbon copy by hand. So we've made this investment for the technology for this stuff. Is it being used at all? And if not, why not?
Mayor, Councilmember Hales, I'll have Chief Hampton respond to your question.
Excuse me, Councilmembers Hales, yes, the technology is being used for citation traffic tickets. There is a difficulty in combining parking tickets into that technology. So that is why that is not being utilized right now. We have to have handheld models of a different vendor and different technology source to incorporate that. So that's something that we are still currently working on with Ms. Kathy Matthews, courts violations, the court clerk, head court clerk, as well as Regis that we utilize because we oftentimes we do have uncommissioned, non-commissioned personnel issuing those parking tickets. So that is another bite of the apple that we have to satisfy as well, because the commission personnel have a little bit more of discretion and authority in going into locating information about vehicles, persons, pedigree, DOR, all of such because of their training. However, the non-commissioned do not have that same protocol. It's a little bit less of a authority to issue a parking ticket.
Right. I understand the parking control. People are different. They don't have those terminals, but I'm really more, I'd like to get a sense of how much these terminals and printers are being used by the officers in the marked cars to write tickets versus writing something by hand. And then it has to be turned into somebody who's got to put it in the computer because it was, if I recall, not an insignificant investment. And I think it probably streamlines a great deal of the process in terms of managing these tickets. And I just would like to know that we're actually using the technology that we've invested in on the street.
I can 100% tell you we are utilizing that technology because it does save us time, effort, and even the staffing that goes into that. Specifically, when you're talking about multiple tickets being issued, a no insurance, a speeding, a stoplight, a stop sign, all of such, as opposed to writing each one of those tickets out. Now, when it comes to the implementation, that is a training mechanism that we still have. I could say right now we're probably over 65 to 75% of utilizing it, and as new personnel come in, they do have to get trained on that. And as as the equipment goes down, we have to immediately try to get that back up. So the troubleshooting for that equipment. So they still have to have that mechanism available for a contingency plan if that mobile ticketing effort is not available. Yes, sir.
The project that is being proposed for identifying the site for a police and fire station satellite is proposed for 2025. And we believe at that time, certainly it appears that the market at Olive development will, I'm hopeful, be built out. And that is, as many of you know, is creating some public safety challenges already for us. And so I think having a greater presence in that area of the city is going to be beneficial. So I want to make sure before I move on, you're comfortable with the project and you're comfortable with the time period that we've identified for it.
I'm comfortable with it. My only comment was also in looking at that, we're also going to be moving south on 170 at Delmar and 170. The one apartment complex is going to be completed shortly. Across the highway, there'll be another one. So I think we want to mix, because then when those are filled with new residents, that might create new challenges. So giving that time frame of 2025 to see how that all pans out in connection with the markets, that's really going to give us an idea of how our public safety needs to address new conditions in ways we may not have been able to envision at this point. And hopefully by that point, we've also got the new police facility up and running. So I'm happy with the timeline and direction.
If there are no other questions or comments, I'll move to the next project. That's being proposed, the police accreditation update. That's a requirement. So something that we on an ongoing basis pursue. I think it really elevates the police department and gives it greater credibility. Designed for the police and court facility, that the design, as you know, is pretty much complete. We have bid out that project, came back much higher than what we had anticipated for the renovation of the annex for the police department as well as the Trinity building. So the intention is to hold off for a few months and then rebid that project. And in the interim, they're looking at ways to reduce cost for the project so that we will hopefully, when it's rebid, get a better number. I don't believe, based upon the amount that we receive for the bid, that certainly we'll be able to reduce it anywhere near that amount. But hopefully by a combination of waiting for a little while for the market to get developed, I think there's just a saturation of economic activity within our marketplace right now, construction activity, that's driving up that price. We received one bidder for it. We were hopeful that we would receive, when it's rebid, additional bidders for the project. So I want to make sure that that you are comfortable in the way that I am proceeding with that project, to delay it and also to revisit and see if we can reduce costs by cutting things out. Any questions on that?
I would just ask, is there, I mean, if there was one respondent to the request for bid, we could wait a couple months, but why not continue to try to get other contractors to submit? Because that's, you know, a list of one is not a very good list.
As a part of the, as you know, as part of the bidding process, there are legal requirements. And so I would suspect that our consultants are still out there marketing the project, but we are unfortunately in a challenging time in getting people that, there's just a low unemployment number right now. And so getting the skilled workers that are needed for construction projects is it's just a challenge. Same challenges that we're having with hiring some of our positions, police officers, firefighters, and such. You look at that and you compound the interest rates that we are seeing today. In my mind, I would not recommend moving forward with the project at this point. But I think that the economy, everything that they're doing at the federal level is so that the economy will cool off. And so I believe that it will, and there'll be a better time for our project. So the next project is simply tied to the prior one, which is the construction of the police annex and the court facility. Evaluate community paramedic program. And I've asked Chief Henson to provide you with just some information on what we are proposing for that program, because it is tied to another project that is being proposed as well. So Chief Henson.
Good morning. As you know, this has been on our project list for a couple of years now. The problem is we've been waiting on the federal and state governments, and it's kind of in a gridlock stage. So what we're moving on now, with the mobile integrated healthcare program is to help us serve people with chronic issues, mainly the elderly in the community who don't get out much, those that are underserved. Deals mainly with people, like that have diabetes, congestive heart failure, strokes, falls and fractures, those who frequently wind up at the hospital instead of, being able to see their doctor. This allows us to go visit them, help them get their medications right, help them see or learn how to take care of themselves better so they don't wind up at the hospital near as much. The problem is the funding from the federal government is at a stalemate. What we're looking at now is in the healthcare system, by 2030, they're saying that people 65 or older will make up 21% of the population. Right now, we're at 15%. So as this grows, the need's going to grow for this program. And unfortunately, right now, with the wheels of government turning slow at the federal level, there's no funding for the program. So what we are doing is being proactive right now. We are meeting with insurance companies who deal with Medicare and Medicaid. And we met with one the other day, MedAware, to work out a possible contractual agreement to see their patients that they cover. St. Charles City just did this. They wound up with 440 people in the city of St. Charles that are on this program, and they can be seen by the fire department. Now, what they do is they pay a flat rate to the paramedics, and they can see these patients up to 11 times. Now, again, this helps people who have insurance of some kind. It still leaves the people out that don't have the insurance. What we're looking into is to make this as a net zero cost to the city by seeing a certain number of people that have insurance that will cover at least 2 to 3 days a week. The flat rate that is paid by the insurance companies will pay the salaries of the people we send out to see these, and it'll leave us the additional money to be able to pay these people to go out and serve the underserved part of the community. That is our goal right now, is to make this as net zero cost to the community, but provide the service to the community and those who need it. The biggest thing right now is identifying those who need the program. So we're working with the hospitals through our zip codes in the area to identify those who are repeat customers to hospitals. And a lot of them, unfortunately, is just it's as simple sometimes as forgetting to take their medication or getting out of order or not being able to pick up their medication. And so it's a integrated health system where we set up visits with these individuals. We make sure they understand their medicines. We help them, we evaluate their house for ways to make their house safer for them to move around in, and just basically do wellness checks on them. Again, in order to do the program right now, we would have to somewhat contract with companies like MedAware to see the patients that they'll pay us for, to build up the money to see the patients who don't have any insurance, which is our ultimate goal, is to take care of our citizens who need the help. So our ultimate goal is also not to cost the taxpayers money to take care of these people. So this is the program we're looking at now. We are currently waiting to hear from a couple other insurance companies. They actually come to the firehouse and met with us and some other districts around us to talk about this program. Another thing is the hospitals are heavily involved, because when a patient returns within 40 days for the same thing, they don't get paid by the insurance companies. So they're on board with trying to get this program going. Everybody's on board except for the government and the regulations that need to be made. So right now there's ways to circumvent it. We're working on them ways, and I'm hoping to have in a study session with you in the next couple months a detailed program of how we can do this.
Honorable Mayor and council members, one of the things that we've talked about is the evolution of the code enforcement division to code compliance. One of the other discussions that I want to have with you is the evolution of the fire department. The fire department really, as a percentage, focuses on fire very, very little. And the real emphasis in this day and age is on emergency medical services, but we still refer to our fire department as the fire department, but we don't emphasize as a part of that the emergency medical services portion of it, which really takes up a huge amount of time. So I will be proposing next fiscal year that we really look at changing the fire department's name to Fire and Emergency Medical Services. That way we really highlight both aspects of their job. And that's going to be new for Chief Henson as well, but I think he's in agreement with it. Okay. The next project proposed up under public safety is to lower the current ISO rating for commercial buildings. One of the things that we're trying to do is to benefit our businesses and residents by lowering their insurance rate. Having emergency preparedness training for the city staff to ensure that, you know, if there is a fire that happened here, or if there's some sort of, God forbid, an active shooter situation, how would we begin to exit this building? Any questions on any of those projects before I move on? So establish the Police Explorer program, and that was one of the programs I believe Councilmember Clay had mentioned. We're looking at the creation of that program, not next fiscal year, but the following fiscal year, when the police department believes they will actually have time to pursue its creation. And so again, with this, I want to make sure that it is a project that the mayor and council want us to pursue, and within the time period that you want us to pursue it. So are there any questions on that one? Okay. If
Are you looking for someone to say yes
Yeah, I just want to make sure, I know that it was a very important project for you and for Mayor Pro Tem Smotherson. So I want to make sure that you are in agreement with it, but the council as a body is in agreement that this project that we should pursue and the time period for pursuing it.
Yes.
Good with them. Okay. The next project up under public safety is the dispatch separation. As you know, you've already given direction on that and we're moving forward with it. The next project ties to the presentation that Chief Henson just provided. He talked about people with insurance. He did not speak about people without insurance. And so we would be interested in pursuing the quarter-cent sales tax specifically for the creation or the enhancement of that new program. And that would occur in 2025. I don't believe that there would be a need for a major information campaign regarding it. Is pretty simple. That if the council and if the residents want this program, then it would be tied to providing funding for it. And as Chief Henson has indicated, our intention is to provide you with a study session that gets into more of the details of what's being proposed.
I just had one question. Would you be proposing if it's going to be directed to that, would we be creating an account so that we could really know that, because that's what I think the residents would then want. There'd be questions about, well, how do we know it's going to that and not being used for a new pumper truck? I mean, that kind of question. So would we be able to account for that specifically?
Our Mayor, Councilmember McMahon certainly would be able to create a separate fund that would be able to track those funds, track its expenditures, and clearly show how those monies are being used.
Mr. Rose, you mentioned briefly Prop C, which I believe is that the one that's on the April ballot. Is that?
No, that is Prop M. What's being proposed is for this particular program, Prop C, because C is standing for care.
Well, let's go, if I can, then let me, the one that's coming up the marijuana, the pot tax, marijuana tax. I guess the one question I have is just thinking about this. I've not seen any pros or cons any place, yet there are innumerable municipalities, as well as I believe St. Louis County, that have this on the ballot. So it's really more of a question of, do we have any idea that is there any campaign out there pro or con from even the marijuana industry? Because I've been traveling a bit, but I'm trying to determine whether or not, it is municipal elections. It's usually not a very big turnout. In our particular case, it's really just a school board race, I believe, and this. So my question is more to you and actually to the whole body. I haven't seen any conversations one way or the other regarding the multitude of these taxes that are going on right now.
Mayor Pro.
I was just saying, the only thing I've heard is we have a local proprietor who believed 3% was excessive. That's the only thing I've heard.
And I've got that, and I think if I were in his shoes, I'd be saying the same thing. But I don't know that an industry that, with all due respect, is usually flush with cash. I'm surprised that there's not an educational campaign to try to impact some of these, but maybe that's just they're accepting that as a cost of doing business.
Eric, I have not heard of any a pro or con campaign. As you are aware, Missouri Municipal League was coordinating much of this since it's a statewide issue. In some discussions with you as a council, I'd indicated it would be good to allocate those funds towards public safety. And as a part of public safety, also looking at education, especially for children, the potential impacts of the use of marijuana, that being seen as still as a gateway drug. But we have not distributed any information on that. If there is a desire for you to take action, I would recommend development of a resolution and putting that resolution in front of you for consideration. And then we would provide information to the residents seeing exactly how the tax funds would be used. The next item being proposed is the development of the West End Business Patrol. I believe Chief Hampton spoke to you earlier about the need for a greater presence in the West area with the Market at Olive development happening. Its build out as well as future development that's going to occur. But I do agree with Councilmember McMahon that looking at Delmar and I-170 area, especially with the apartment complexes, we should really roll that and make it a larger project to include that area as well. Street lighting enhancements and updating, that's an ongoing project. As you know, Public Works working with police to identify those areas where lighting would benefit the community. So we'll continue to pursue that program if it's acceptable to you. That concludes the public safety portion priority. Are there any questions that you had regarding any of the projects being proposed up under public safety before I move on? Okay. Encourage high quality growth is the next priority. First project under that is to evaluate best practices for code enforcement. You're going to hear a little bit about that, what we're proposing in the next section of your agenda. So Dr. Wagner will be doing a presentation. So if it's okay with you, I'll move through that project and talk more about improved landlord/property manager registration list. That's one that a couple of you have talked about, making sure that for those vacant properties in particular, that they are indeed placing them, making us aware that the properties are vacant and registering them.
City Manager Rose, so what is this? I've heard it referenced both in this meeting and in other meetings, this list that exists. What is the status of that list today? Would we consider it at all current? Those who have not, have they been put into a process for remediating the lack of registration? Can you say a little bit about that?
Honorable Mayor, Councilmember Clay, I would not consider it current today. I think that we're proposing to have the project that would place a greater emphasis on that program to make sure that we have a number of rentals in this community. And so making sure that as they become vacant, that they do register them, as the businesses become vacant, that they do register them. And updating that list to make it more current. I believe that's accurate. Dr. Wagner, is that correct?
Yeah, ask a question on that also. And that is that for vacant houses, are we not fining the property owners for a vacant house?
Our Mayor Pro Tem Smotherson, I don't think that we have a system in place that ensures that for every vacant house that is not registered, that we find them, or I'm going to say it a different way, that we encourage them to register that property, and there are multiple ways for doing that. I think that we have something on the books that allows it, but I don't believe we have a system in place today and have not for decades that really ensures that occurs. What we're suggesting is that let's put that system in place so that we can be assured that it does occur in the future.
Well, when you say system in place, I don't know what you mean by what occurs. what will occur? I'm not sure I understand. Are we talking about a fee and fines? Because what I'm actually asking is, do we need to establish fees and fines for vacant houses? And the reason I say that is there are programs out there, there are cities out there that are actually doing that. And there is a vacant house fee. And I mean, you know, because again, we need to change what we're doing and we need to establish this. And one of the things that I'd like to see happen is that instead of FY 23-24, that change to FY 23, because it needs to be established now. And what I mean by that is that we need to change what we've been doing. Because these people that are sitting on these vacant houses will always sit on these vacant houses until something changes. And they need to start paying a fee, a vacant house fee. And that is a program that is happening statewide, meaning that in other cities, they have a vacant house fee that their owners are paying. And I think we need to establish that and get that started sooner rather than later, because we've been sitting on this thing as long as you've been here. Because one of the very first things that I did with you, and then you can tell, is that I took you to 1456 Laughlin. And we met the brother that they own the house, and that house is today sitting vacant.
Honorable Mayor Pro Tem Smotherson, that problem has existed long before I arrived on this thing. And so what we're proposing, you asked, what do I mean by a system? And so I would ask, if a home becomes vacant today, how do we know that? How do we know it's vacant? So we need to have a mechanism that alerts us that the home is vacant. And that we also need to have staffing that can ensure, maybe they're on patrol for code enforcement purposes, but they see and pass by a home frequently where there's no activity. Maybe the mail is piling up. So it gives us some indication that that home is vacant. That's what I mean by a system. Something that alerts us that a home is vacant so that we can take action, and we actually have an infrastructure in place that allows us to take action. So it's systematic. It's not just, let's put a policy in place that says we can fine. It's a greater issue than that. So let's create a system, and that's what we're proposing.
Okay, and I definitely understand that. What about the houses that we know are vacant? We know they're vacant.
I think we're saying, yes, we need to update that list. Our intention is to do that. If you agree that that's a program that we should be pursuing, I believe that's what the discussion is going to be about now, as well as when we focus more on code enforcement in the next section of this of agenda.
So just to clarify, there is a fee for the vacant housing registration. And if I recall, it goes back to like 2015 or so at least. But what, how much is that fee?
Honorable Mayor.
200? So $200.
You know what the cost?
200. And I guess it would be helpful also to if we could maybe see what that list looks like right now. Because we often get calls. I mean, I can think of one house, and I'll share with Dr. Wagner, that's been vacant for probably 3-4 months now, at least. And you're absolutely right. Like, unless somebody calls us about it, I think having inspectors going out and training them to take notice of these kinds of things will be very helpful and proactive.
And for the purpose of this item is simply to get your agreement that this is something that you want us to pursue. We will bring forward the details of it at a later date, exactly how we intend to implement it. But I want to make sure that the project is what we should be pursuing and that the time frame that we should be pursuing in it. Councilmember.
So to that point of time frame, I would concur with Councilmember Smotherson that I believe it should be accelerated. So it should join those that are fiscal year 23, because this is a conversation that a number of us have had for some time. So because to Councilmember Hale's point, there is a policy, there is a structure in place. We just haven't been assessing it. It hasn't been implemented. So seems more an execution issue than anything else. So to the degree we can get it actually executed, I think we'll be better served because everything else is in place.
I agree. Mayor and Councilmember Clay, I think that you have a policy in place that allows for the finding, but you don't have an infrastructure in place that allows for the execution. And so what we're proposing is to look at both, make sure that the policy is sound. And that's some of the things that we'll talk a little bit about during the next section. But also, and perhaps most importantly, putting the infrastructure in place that's needed to fully execute on that policy.
Well, just very quickly to Councilmember Hale's question and statement, and that is, and I asked this probably a week ago and have asked this before. I'd like this council to see that list, especially, well, I'd like my colleague in especially in the third ward to see that list of vacant houses that we have and the fines or fees that they're paying on that.
Honorable Mayor Pro Tem, you've asked for that list. We're putting that list together for you. Now we'll provide that information to the full council.
And one other quick thing is, as you're assembling the system, I would just say this, let us not make the perfect the enemy of the good. I think there's value in just starting, even if it's not, we know Laughlin, we know Councilmember Hales has a vacant property. Let's just go, we know that, let's just go start assessing the appropriate fines. We can build a more perfect system, but there are two that were mentioned right here. Let's just go on Monday and do that, since we have the policy and the fee structure already in place.
I don't want to mislead you to think that we have not been taking any action on this. And I think Dr. Wagner will share with you during his presentation the actions that have been taken. It's that we don't have a system though. And so it becomes catch as catch can, rather than something that you can be assured that if there is a vacant home, we're going to identify it and we're going to take action regarding it. So that's where the system comes in, more so than someone alerts us that there's a vacant house and then we take action. It's just being more proactive than reactive.
For the two that we know, we can go, right?
I believe Dr. Wagner has that on his list, so I'm pretty sure that he's going to be taking action on those. Or any other questions on that? If not, you're going to be talking about the next section, establishing a code compliance control, a solid waste rate study update. I'm sure it comes to no surprise to you that currently general fund pretty much subsidizes the solid waste collection. There was one project that we wanted to add on to this, that being to identify whether it is more costly to have the stickers for the leaf collection versus just allowing people to set those bags out. So we want to include that as a part of the solid waste rate study to evaluate whether that policy makes sense going forward. Is that?
As part of that, are we also going to look at what's happened in Ames Place and study the areas that have dumpsters, and as to whether certain areas can be reduced from 2 to 1? Because I just heard this week from another resident who said those things never fill up in his neighborhood. And I think that would cut down on a lot of wear and tear if there's plenty of space. I think there are some areas where it's probably needed twice a week, but I think assessing those areas would be helpful as well.
We could certainly include that as a part of the study.
And then on this subject, I'd like to just actually add with the solid waste pickup and Council Members Hale's point about dumpsters. Is there any consideration, or can there be a consideration that we can test getting rid of dumpsters in certain areas and just test that out and see how that works out. For instance, I know neighbors in the 6500 block of Plymouth would love to get rid of their dumpsters. And the main reason is that we have a real problem in that area, especially on that northeast side, with the alleys and the dumpsters and the access that people have to those alleys. And that is that they dump everything next to the dumpsters. As if they see a dumpster, they're going to dump mattresses, furniture, everything, you name it, it's going to be dumped, not in the dumpster, right next to the dumpster. And it literally is creating a problem with the neighbors that actually access those alleys. So again, I've had neighbors literally tell me, let's try it out. Let's get rid of the dumpsters in a certain area and see how that works out, and just give them trash can containers that they can push out in the alley and then bring them back into their backyard. Because if they don't have those dumpsters back there, maybe it will stop the illegal dumping that's happening.
That's certainly another project that we could add to this list. And I'll need to work with the new Public Works Director on the timing for it, but certainly that's something that that we can evaluate.
I just have a question since we're talking about garbage dumpsters and things. I've had a few comments from residents that do not like the house garbage cans that are placed in the park and down Jackson Avenue onto the park that's in that area. I'm forgetting the name of it right this second, but is there any way that we can get more metal cans put into the parks instead of the big house garbage cans?
Sure. Director Dunkel is here, and we're, as you know, going through the budget process now. And so I'm sure that's something that he will add to his proposed budget. There are no other questions. The next project is the create an infill review board. That's one that's been on the, that's a carryover from the prior development or work plan. This is the time frame that we are looking at. The establishment of a housing program, and this is certainly tied to the next project, which is the Third Ward Revitalization Program. Both of those we are advancing today.
I just had a clarification. So we have an infill review board currently. Is this intended to be architectural review? Because that's what I recall us talking about establishing.
I believe you are accurate. Is that accurate? Okay, so we'll need to switch that to architectural review board.
If I could just chime in here, it would be this one. This would may predate many of us on council. It would be nice to check this box and get this one done. It's been languishing for years, and that's not a criticism of anybody in this room. That's just, it would really be nice to get this one knocked off.
And I would just follow up with Mayor Crow's comment, because I know the residents had asked for it. And I think there were just some starts and stops, and it might have been just because for an architectural review board that there were the different neighborhoods and styles. There were just some impediments to keeping it moving forward. If that's really the problem, I think then we need to be able to then communicate that to the residents to say the difficulty in creating an architectural review board is X, Y, and Z, so that they can understand why we don't have one if we can't actually create one. And so not necessarily establishing it, but figuring out why we don't have one.
What I would propose is having a study session on this project for this fiscal year. And so because I know we started down that road with trying to implement one. And so that will enable us to provide you with an update on where that project is. And to advise you if it's something that we don't believe can happen here and for what reasons, as you highlighted. Evaluate developing dedicated bike lanes and more walkable areas. So any questions on any of the projects before I move on?
I would just roll briefly. I think as we walk through as we go through the bike lanes, I do think it would probably be good for us to make outreach to our neighboring communities, and in particular, Clayton, I believe, who has the business district and has the bike path running down the side through their business district. And I think one of the best things we can do is learn from those who have gone before us and see the pros and the cons. I think that, we have a different landscape need, type of probably vehicular traffic than they have in downtown Clayton. But I understand that the bike paths in Clayton have probably not been used to the extent they thought they would be, and have frustrated business owners and have frustrated owners, and have had a few more accidents than they had anticipated. So my only thought is just, can we make outreach to them so we know what we're getting ourselves into, even though I think our roads are probably particularly not nearly as congested as that particular area is of our neighbor, but just kind of good to learn from mistakes maybe the others have made.
Thank you. And before we leave the page, I just wanted to go back to code enforcement, establishing the code and compliance control. And part of what I really want in that is an explanation and understanding of what our inspectors are doing. I'll give you a perfect example, and that is today, just simply driving down 82nd Street, headed to Page before I came here. And there is an address, and you may want to make a note, 1535 82nd Boulevard. And I'm not, and really what I want to understand is when I say what our inspectors are doing, because this guy he has a junkyard. That's just plain and simple what it is. It's a junkyard. He collects junk. It is in the front, it is on the side, it is in the back. So I'm really kind of, scratching my head and wondering, okay, what if I just drive by a couple of times every once in a while? What are our inspectors doing? Because this is just blatant and it just sits there. It's right there in front of your face. So that's one of the things that I'd really like to have addressed, and just so that we know what our inspectors are doing, because our neighbors shouldn't be seeing this, and public shouldn't be seeing this.
Honorable Mayor Pro Tem Smothers, we have in the upcoming section of your agenda a full presentation on code enforcement. And so we'll be answering that question and many others that I suspect that we will get as we discuss how we are proposing to evolve it. Any other questions? Finishing up, encourage high quality growth, evaluate which city services are online and or can be converted to online for citizen access. That's just to make us a more resident friendly or citizen friendly municipality. Digital services, it's in alignment with the 24/7 City Hall concept. Implement plan to make appropriate city services online. That's actually a part of that. So we'll combine those. Change code enforcement division name to code compliance. We'll talk more about that as part of the next section. The annual or the update of the comprehensive plan that is currently underway. And if you have questions regarding the status of that, probably could, Dr. Wagner can respond to those as a part of the code enforcement presentation as well. And what I had referenced prior to that, once the comprehensive plan is updated. This gets back to the control of development that occurs within the city, making sure that your zoning code marries with the comprehensive plan. So I went through those pretty quickly, but any questions on any of those? If not, I would like to start with the next priority. Is everyone good on moving forward at this point? Okay. Prudent fiscal management. Making sure that we have accurate 5-year financial forecast, that information being updated on a annual basis. That's especially important considering the 2 major disasters that we have experienced within the last 5 years, one being COVID and then the second one being the flood, and what are the impacts that you're going to realize on your revenues. Establishing a purchasing cart, develop a fleet management program, identify financial management training needs for accounting systems, streamlining the financial and payroll system. That's so that we can work smarter and not harder. Develop a 5-year street and sidewalk program. Each year we include information regarding these streets and sidewalks that we intend to improve. We want to look at creating an actual 5-year program that we can include in the comprehensive infrastructure program that we put together each year. So that's what that project targets.
I just have a question about the road projects. Is there any way that we can have a public format where people can look up when their road is on the schedule?
Honorable Mayor, Councilmember Klein, I don't know that we have a schedule in place currently. Part of this is to create that 5-year schedule so that we can tell people exactly when we are planning to make improvements to their roads. I think we have some information at this point and happy to provide whatever we have, but I don't know that we have a true system.
Yeah, I guess
and
my
that's-
thinking was just that if we have something, if this is part of the project is working on a more organized way to put this out, that we create a way for the public to have access to that, because I've gotten several requests from people, when is my road on the schedule? And then I have to go to you and, it's this process. So to kind of streamline that process, I think would be a helpful thing.
Right. We will certainly be able to place the improvement projects, street improvement projects on our website. Once that list is created and it's complete, so that people can access it via the website.
I thought we had received, at least on an annual basis, streets that had been, because there was I remember Director Albasan would present, there was a coding system and the like, because I've actually shared that with Third Ward residents. So I thought that existed at least on an annual basis.
We certainly have that on an annual basis. We do the capital improvement program each year. We have some general idea of the projects that we are going to, street projects that we're going to get to, let's say over a 5-year period. But we really need to do a deep dive into the analysis to actually go out, evaluate the streets again, evaluate the sidewalks again to determine what changes may have taken place and to realign the information that we have. And I don't know that it's comprehensive. I don't know that they've taken a look at the entire city, which is what we need to do.
Sure. And in my off-use phrase, the perfect being the enemy of the good, we do have something that articulates that. So I think, potentially a first step is just that annual plan making that available, I think might be a step forward. Understand we're working to perfect it, but right now we have something that's at least good.
I certainly understand, and yeah, we will be able to provide you with the information that we currently have. It's just making sure that we're taking every effort to improve that information.
Along the same lines, my question was those presentations that we got on the streets. I think we're probably coming close to the time that we're due to reevaluate all the streets, and I think that was called the PACER program, where they all got number scores. So I don't recall when the last one was, but I think we're probably right up to that point again.
So if everyone is comfortable regarding the creation of a more comprehensive street and sidewalk program for a 5-year period, and within that time frame, which would be next fiscal year, our intention would be to pursue that project. And in the meantime, provide you with all of the information that we have at least thus far put together on the capital improvements. Finishing up the fiscal and prudent fiscal management, update the accounting policy and procedures, explore adjusting employees to the same annual evaluation cycle, one in July and the others in January. That just makes life, I think, simpler for the department directors for evaluation purposes and for budgeting, quite frankly. Develop performance measurements. One of the things that we want to do is to be very transparent in how the organization is performing with you as a council and also with our residents. So how many miles of street do we improve each year? That ranges from not just, how much snow are we plowing? How many our invoices are we processing? All of those workload items, we want to be transparent, and this is how the organization is performing. As a part of that, we'll also want to get information which you've agreed to on every 2 years to allow a citizen satisfaction report. That information would also be included in the performance measurements. What do the residents think of our services that we offer, whether it's police or fire or public works or any of those that touch them, parks and recreation, touch them directly? What do they think of the services that we provide? So we want to look at performance measurements twofold. One is quantitative and the other is qualitative. And that will be a task that my intention is to assign to the assistant city manager. We have it targeted for starting that project in next fiscal year, but I can tell you, having been the person having to put this type of program together before, it will likely take more than a year to accomplish. So I want to make sure that you're comfortable with what's being proposed, the project, as well as the time period for starting it.
I will say, City Manager Rose, I am one of the things that I at least like to offer is in the private sector, performance measurements seem to coalesce around profits. Everything kind of starts from that point, and everyone is evaluated based on their ability to enhance that bottom line. We have a different North Star, if you will, in municipal government. We don't have the profit incentive that the private sector does. So as I see it, we have a number of evaluative points. We have, for example, completion of the work plan. That's an evaluative point. Adherence to the comprehensive plan. That's an evaluative point. We have any number to the to the earlier conversation about Olive, we have any number of documents and plans and other things that ostensibly we could designate as our North Star. If we are doing all of the things in this plan over here, then we are successful. Understanding that actually, from a resident perspective, we could do all of this and still my trash didn't get picked up. So we're not successful. So I guess what I would ask for is a real alignment on what we are measuring versus what is valuable to residents and to the council. Because there's many different ways to evaluate the effectiveness of city government, given the disparate nature of the plans and potentially the evaluative mechanisms that we have.
Honorable Mayor, Councilmember Clay, one of the things that we're trying to accomplish with this type of project is so that every employee understands how they impact service delivery. That ranges from the person that simply collects the solid waste to the individuals that are out there ticketing people for speeding. So that whole gambit, we want for every employee to understand how they impact service delivery. And if you don't think someone that collects solid waste is terribly important to service delivery, let the trash start to build up and see what the impacts are going to be to the other employees that may have a direct relationship with our residents. So we want to look at it very comprehensively. And I agree that we need to be clear as to what those value points are and why their particular job is so important. Does that address the concern or your issue?
It does. Yeah, because again, we could accomplish everything on the comprehensive plan and our residents still think we're lousy.
A part of that is also to continue with the resident satisfaction surveys so that we look at both the quantitative but also the qualitative. I agree. We think we're doing a really good job, and then they tell us, well, maybe it's not so good. But the way that we find that information out is to ask them the questions, which you've agreed to do every couple of years. And so I would certainly recommend that you continue with doing the resident satisfaction survey so that we hear firsthand from all residents. It is a statistically valid survey that is done. What do they think about the services that we provide? Any other questions on this? The final project was prepare the annual capital improvement program. So if there are any other questions on any of those that fall up under the priority of prudent fiscal management. If not, I want to make sure that I'm aligning with lunch. And Lareed, what? Okay. So if it is, Mayor, acceptable to you, is it a good time for it? Before we get into the next.
I'd call that a priority.
Okay, okay. If we could take a quick 30-minute break for lunch and then reconvene.
And may I ask, at that point in time, you're going to continue with your presentation and then we're doing?
Yes, we will. We are targeted to conclude by 2 o'clock and we should, without question, meet that requirement. I think that I'm pretty much finished. But I did want to reconvene so that I can get questions from any of the information that's been presented.
And then once you've concluded the reports, then we go into exec, am I correct?
Then you have a presentation on code enforcement. Once you finish this
correct.
section, then you've got the code enforcement.
And then exec, though. I'm just trying to make sure for those people who made plans for the afternoon that we're sort of within the time frame of, I'd anticipated being home to see my daughter from college by 3 o'clock. So I'm just assuming that.
Yeah, we'll be
I'm gonna
finished with
make that.
everything long before then.
Well, you may.
Well, only-
I think some conversations may take longer than you anticipate. I would just, all I'm saying is if we can move through lunch quicker than 30 minutes, I would appreciate it because I just think we're ready to keep going. So that's all I would say.
if one option is to take a 15-minute break, we could reconvene and you can continue lunch while I finish up this portion of the agenda. I think it's only one other section, two other sections that are very short to finish. Does that work?
Roger, we good? Are we live already? We will now resume the city manager's update on, in this case now, improved infrastructure. To anyone who is watching, we apologize that many of us will probably still be eating our lunch while you are watching us, but Mr. Rose.
Honorable Mayor, I'd like to just conclude the presentation. We've got two more sections to briefly move through. The first one being improved infrastructure, the creation of an asset management strategy and execution. Want to make sure that we have a sense of what all our assets are out there, especially for insurance purposes. And that project would be headed by the finance department and engaging all of the directors. The creation of a ADA transition plan to make sure that all of our buildings and facilities are ADA compliant. And if not, establishing a plan to transition those facilities to compliance. The next project is the establishment of a stormwater master plan. That project is underway with your Stormwater Commission. There is going to be a broader issue at some point that you as a council will need to address, and that is what role does the Metropolitan Sewer District have with the management of stormwater runoff, not just within University City, but within the region, and making sure that what they believe is in alignment with what you as the council believe their responsibilities are. Create a road and sidewalk condition ratings analysis. There's software that we can purchase to assist us with that. And I've talked about the need for doing an analysis of the entire city before. Preventative vehicle maintenance program. That's to make sure that we're getting the most that we can out of the various vehicles that we have, ensuring that they are maintained on an ongoing basis. Any questions on any of those projects before I touch on the last one for improved infrastructure? Seeing none. The Loop Area Safety Initiative Plan, if you recall, that's a partnership that we have with WashU, where it's been an ongoing project that we've been engaged in over the past several years. Myself and Joanna Schooler with WashU Chief Hampton, and then the new chief will be participating with us. The idea is to make that loop area safer. It's the area that often gets the most attention, certainly from a pedestrian traffic perspective. It is probably the central area that we have with the highest volume of pedestrian traffic. If there are no questions on that project, I'll move into the final priority that you have established, that being community quality of life. If you recall, I have authorized moving forward with updating and improving the city's website to make it more user-friendly. That project actually is being led by our new communications manager. I'll be in as a part of the next budget cycle. We'll be asking for funding to conduct the resident satisfaction survey. If you recall, you had previously agreed to do that every 2 years. Seamless customer service initiative being led by our human resources director. The intention there is to train our employees on better customer service for our citizens, especially our residents, that they will engage with. Good example is if you receive a call, how do you transfer that call if it's something that you indeed can't help them? The best way probably isn't simply to say, I'll transfer you to this department. It's more appropriate to stay on the line with them to ensure that they are connected to the individual that can help them. So it's a training that we want to go through with every employee in the organization to ensure that they understand what good customer service is.
City Manager Rose, very quickly, the step before getting to someone who may or may not transfer you to the right department is, and we've heard this I've heard this from residents. I believe my colleagues have commented on this at various times, actually getting through to someone and actually having someone pick up the phone. And I don't, it's anecdotal, admittedly, but I've heard it enough. There may be something to it. Is that more of just a staffing issue as opposed to a training issue? I'm supportive of this particular initiative, but again, I called and didn't get anyone.
I think that's a separate project that we could certainly add to our list of where it may require a different phone system so that we can determine how many of the calls that are coming into the city end up being dropped for whatever reason. Right now, I don't know that I would need to do some research, or staff would, to evaluate whether our current phone system allows that, provides that type of information, but that's something that we should certainly be able to provide to you. If not this phone system, is how do we get a phone system that does provide that type of information? And then you will know if calls are indeed being dropped and what percentage of those calls. Assuming that, let's say you get 100 a day, is 1 or 2 of them being dropped, or are we talking 20 or 30? I don't know that we can provide you with that information today, but it's certainly some information that we would like to provide to you. The creation of a communications policy, and that project will be led by our new communications manager. You'd already given approval to work with a consultant on that, so it's just the execution end of it, but want to ensure that you are still in agreement with moving forward with it.
And very quickly, again, City Manager Rose, we've had a number of communication plans iterations as I've understood it. Do we start with that which has already been created and that becomes a jumping off point as opposed to creating something new? Clearly each, our current director would want obviously put their own stamp on things, but there has been quite a bit of work, as I understand it, done in this area already.
Honorable Mayor, Councilmember Cloud, I don't know that you ever reached a consensus on what your comprehensive communications plan is going to be. And I think, even bringing on a consultant to assist with that is simply pulling all the information that we have developed thus far and really packaging that into a plan that could be presented to you and the council to say, this is indeed what we want to do. We want to engage or not with people on social media, that when an incident occurs where we are not identifying a trend public safety wise, that we are going to engage with the residents in that area to make sure that they understand what's occurring. So we need to really bring forward a package to you so that everyone is on the same page and understands exactly what you are directing as it relates to communications. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions on that? If not, the Explorer, the 311 system, and the creation of a help desk. Right now, all of the calls go to various departments. We want to centralize, or at least explore centralizing that, so you have a one-stop shop system, but what's the cost for doing that? And how does that exactly work? We would like to put together a report and bring that information to you so that that you clearly understand what cost is associated with creating a true 311 system. That also relieves some of the pressure on our police department. People are not calling them as often using their emergency number when it's really more of a routine issue that could be addressed through this 311 system. Next project, unless you had questions on that, is the street renaming. This project was interrupted because of COVID and because of the flood. And so we're proposing to take a greater focus on at least a section of that project next fiscal year. We'd see it as being a long-term project, engaging the residents as a part of it. And that's why I was interrupted during COVID, because we want to ensure that the residents that would be impacted are a part of the process. And so if you're in agreement with that, we would start that project back up next fiscal year. But we would have a great deal of community outreach for any street that we would propose for potential renaming.
Well, the question that I would actually ask is why 24-25 when, I mean, we're pretty much done with that now. And I guess it's right now at the stage where, as you said, we want to engage with the neighbors, but why aren't we doing that? Or why can't we pick that up now?
We could. It's really just a question of priorities for council. We think that the projects such as the creation of a communications plan probably has a higher priority in some of the other ones. But certainly if that's your direction to pick it up now, then we could do that. We believe that are recommending for 24-25 because we think that we'll have the resources available to commit to that project during that time period.
And this doesn't involve the previous commission that was put together for this. So this does not involve them at all. Is that correct?
Honorable Mayor Pro Tem Smotherson, they completed the tasks that you had assigned to them as a council, but it's up to you to determine if you would like to reconvene that task force to revisit the recommendations that they made.
Thank you. Mhm.
Yeah, my guess would be that the task force members will want to continue to be engaged, probably more as individuals than as a task force. I do believe, and I can't speak for anyone else, but I do believe that once we start talking to the residents who are impacted by this, this is going to be a slower walk than anyone anticipates because that it takes on a life of its own. So I think we're going to end up with a broader conversation about the name, and do we necessarily change the name, or do we change who the street was actually named for? Because I think that particularly, I think the second ward that will have the houses that'll be impacted the most, I think that that's probably one where it's going to be a interesting conversation to have with folks that are impacted by this. So I think the time frame probably is appropriate because I think the pushback is going to be probably enough to where it's going to make everyone want to pause at least a little bit and be respectful of the desires of those people impacted.
If there are no other questions, the final project up under the work plan, I believe. I had not moved this forward. Is the creation of a web page that would be dedicated really for seniors in this community so that they would more easily connect with services that are provided. This is being provided within the city, within the county as well. And the intention would be to work with the senior commission that you have in the creation of this web page. Any questions on any of those projects?
I just wanted to throw out there that a possible broad community quality of life project that we might want to put on our radar is just rebuilding our recreation offerings. As we talked about the other night, it's basically at ground zero, and the residents are asking, you know, what can we do? It's staff, it's programming, and it's facilities. It's a huge project. So to put it on our radar in all those kind of categories, I think makes sense, because that's, from what I've gathered, that at the last Parks Commission meeting, we had folks showing up and really imploring us, and Mr. Dunkel will let us know some of the folks he heard from that night. It was Tuesday, just imploring us to do something because my child is missing out on X. And so it's, and those are the people that showed up live. I'm sure we've all gotten emails, but I think that's I think it's a large undertaking, because we don't know what programs necessarily folks want. We don't know what they would look like. We don't know if we'd have to partner with other communities around us to deliver them. So it's really something I think we want to put on the radar so we can start a step-by-step process.
Ramir, Councilmember McMahon, few of the projects that we did not talk about as a part of the executive team that I have added here is getting us really back to normal. That's one of the projects, which is to bring our park services, especially parks and recreation, back to normal. The other is the potential of coordinating or partnering more with the school district, especially for a afternoon or after school type of program. One of the things that I have a personal interest in is creating programs where children can both learn and play at the same time. So it's how do we do that? And I think we have a valuable resource with the various teachers that are here. And we have an infrastructure that I think can supplement some of the things that they're trying to do at the district. And so it's how do we better partner with them in the creation of a free membership for, I'll call them those that are pursuing academic excellence, and for those that are seeking tutoring. I think that we as governments, both the city and the school district, should partner with those type of programs.
I have a different question, but sort of on the getting back to normal theme. Have we or are we developing a plan relative to flooding? I know prior to July, we never saw flooding at the garage and 4 feet of water in the yard, but planning for like an emergency plan for the future. If we have these severe rains, and we now know that's possible, to get people in to move the assets out of danger, the vehicles, trucks, that kind of thing.
Councilmember Hills, I'd say that in two ways. One is we're trying to be proactive and put an infrastructure in place, you as a council, that would prevent some of the flooding that you have realized here recently. And we certainly need a lot of assistance from Metropolitan Sewer District, especially on the maintenance side of it, which we believe they have responsibility for. That if the channels are not being properly maintained, it just creates that environment for more flooding to occur. The other is our Code Red system, which we intend to more extensively use that in the future. The flood that occurred most recently, July of last year, we would have not been able to, even if we had the fully implemented Code Red system, to move the equipment out of harm's way. It happened too quickly, and the time period needed to get our staff from home into those vehicles without placing them in harm's way was much too short. But we are going to use that system more extensively And so I would say putting in infrastructure that can better accommodate stormwater management, making sure the channels are maintained, and then having our code red system so that for those slower flooding events that occur where we do have the opportunity to move our equipment out of the way, certainly we would do that.
Right. I guess my my question is, I think back, was it Katrina? And before you were here, we had a massive rainstorm that came through, and I don't believe any of those facilities flooded then, but we knew that was coming. I agree. Back in July, I remember seeing the weather, and it just seemed like a normal rain overnight, and then it just didn't stop. So I agree, it would be very difficult in that situation. But if there is a known really severe rain event that's coming our way, to take action and make sure that the equipment and stuff is as safe as it can be. Obviously, there's some things that, when you get water inside of that garage and mowers and all of that, and what can you do? So anyway, thank you.
Very quickly, I just wanted to jump in and say, sorry about this, Stacy. I just wanted to go back to something that you mentioned about our summer program. And I would like to see, and especially in this council, really push to direct you into just simply bringing back our summer program, period. With regardless of whether that's tied to the school district, which is fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But have to understand that there's a need in the summer for this type of program. And parents aren't interested in you have parents and kids that aren't interested in going to another summer school program. That's not what they're doing. They want to go to a summer recreation program. And one of the things that I'd like to see us do is not only if we tie ourselves to the school district, but also tie ourselves to the YMCA program, because they have a summer camp program and something that can expand and help us build our summer camp program. But again, we need our summer camp program brought back.
Honorable Mayor Pro Tem Smothers, and I believe that the intent is to have a much more robust recreational program into the future. We first have to have the infrastructure. So we need to get our gym back in order so that we can accommodate that type of program. And the speed at which we do that is dependent upon how much risk do you want to take. And we are moving forward with the bidding process. And so we'll have the costs that are associated with bringing our facilities back online. But it really will depend upon how much risk that the council is comfortable with. I'll certainly make a recommendation. I think I've identified those 4 areas that I think it is worth taking a risk on. But beyond that, you will still make the decision as to whether you want to move forward with it. We're trying really still to work closely with FEMA. They meet with them on a weekly basis. So our hands are tied very closely to theirs as we go through this process of recovery.
City Manager Rose, this is more of a formatting question. The Senge, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, rating
Yes.
associated with it, a 2 versus, I've seen 2 numbers, 2 and 1. 2 versus 1 means what?
The complication, that's the complexity issue. How complex it is to do that? Basically, how many resources will be needed in order
So it's
to
not
execute.
any sort of prioritization
No.
rating. Okay, all right.
I should have explained that. Thank you.
Maybe not right now, but if we could, maybe for Monday night. I think that each of us continue to get regular questions about where we are in the FEMA process. And I realize that it is a give and take, but I think that even just a small agenda item always during this period of time as to where we are, because I think as you've indicated before, we know this is a long walk. But I think that it's great for us to be able to tell the citizens where we are in the conversations of what if there's any questions that are unanswered or things that need to be applied for, so that they can feel like they're a part of the process as well.
We can certainly address that up under the city manager section, I believe, of the agenda, based upon the agenda items already proposed for your consideration. I'll skip through these because most of these are internal. And so unless there is some concern with any of the projects up under employees, I will move through that one. So any questions on any of that? Any concerns? All right. Any final thoughts regarding any of the information that has been presented to you? I think I have a good sense of the projects that are your priority and the time frame within which you want us to pursue those projects. Again, the intention is to finalize this document to prepare it for your final consideration. So it'll be placed on an upcoming council agenda for final consideration. Right. If it is acceptable to you, we'll move right into the next section of this agenda, which is the presentation on our code enforcement policy and compliance. And I will turn things over to Dr. Wagner. Dr. Wagner.
Good afternoon, everybody, at least as of 10 minutes ago. As Mr. Rose talked about, we are kind of rebranding, I think, the code enforcement section of the Planning and Development Department from code enforcement to code compliance. And it certainly does represent, I think, a change in culture of the department. The intent is to go really to gain compliance as opposed to taking a more punitive approach that I think we probably have in the past. I've only been doing this for a year, and this goes back a little bit longer from what I understand. So there'll be a new look on these 6 electric cars that comprise the code compliance fleet now. So at least we don't have to get new stationery, so that would be good. So we'll just need to change the name on the cars from code enforcement to code compliance. And we do have 6 electric cars. I believe we lost 1 in the flood. So we're working on replacing that. It reinstates an approach that Mr. Rose talked about that goes back to the 1990s, I understand, and where the code compliance officers and inspectors will have a specific area of the city to patrol. And this is what that map might look like. Area 1 obviously goes along through Olive, covers the area north of the loop, as well as the loop area itself. So that would be the code compliance officer that we currently have. And then areas 2, 3, 4, and 5 are more vertical from the city, and of course, taking away the area around Olive. And then we would have 1 other person that would be kind of a floater that would be needed to, of course, cover days off, some areas may require a little bit more attention on occasion. So that sixth person will be able to stay pretty busy as well, I believe. Some side effects from this new approach. Impacts on the court docket. It could be kind of busy, at least initially anyway. It's as some more of the cases, that ones that aren't taken care of by the residents, that they wind up in court. We'll have to certainly account for that. Could be some pushback from the residents and the citizens, although it could go the other way around as well. And of course, with any public policy issues, there could be some unexpected outcomes that we would need to be ready for as well. So what do we hope to accomplish by doing this? We want to be more streamlined in the department as far as the processes and procedures. They do need a little touching up, I'll have to admit. Certainly improved housing conditions. And Councilmember Smotherson's comment earlier about the house up on 82nd Street, I believe our new approach would certainly probably catch that. At least that's going to be our expectation of the inspectors. Compliance of a lot of other things as well. Signs, particularly those up along Olive, we'll need to tighten those up. Some environmental concerns, derelict automobiles, vacant properties, et cetera. So I think we can cover a lot more ground with this approach as opposed to how we're doing things now. And maybe certainly work with area nonprofits. SHED is a good example. They've come forward to our department, Mary Kennedy and I, our senior planner, wanting to maybe partner on a few things, work together. So I think between SHED and some other nonprofits, I think it's a great partnership opportunity. And well, before we go to the cats, did you want to cover the cats first and then cover questions, or do you want me to? Okay, we'll talk. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. There we go. Community cats. As you know, Ms. Ginsburg has been to the council meetings a few times to request that we update the TNR ordinance, and they requested it as such. Community cat caregivers, in accordance with and pursuant to a process of trap, neuter, return, are authorized and encouraged to provide food, water, shelter, and medical care for a community cat while not being considered the owner, harborer, controller, or keeper of a community cat. And the city attorney has indicated that nothing in the code as it's written right now prohibits feeding the cats on private property. So staff cannot recommend approval of the requested amendment. The language is a little bit too broad, allowing for feeding anywhere. Volunteers already allowed to feed on their own properties, on the private properties. And it does, I think perhaps most importantly, attracts unwanted pests. So not only do the cats feed on this food, a lot of other critters do as well. So our recommendation is that the ordinance remains as it is written today. And we're going to, as part of our new approach, kind of train the code compliance team on best practices for dealing with the community cats. Now I'm done. Be happy to entertain any questions.
I just have a question about this whole issue. So if you have a code enforcement officer that maybe interprets the code a little bit differently, how is there accountability for that? Like how do you know about that, and how are you accountable?
Well, that's one of the things that we're going to certainly Mark Zions, who's taken over the inspectors, is going to talk to the team about consistency and making sure that we're focusing on the things that we need to focus on, and making sure you don't. I mean, it's tackle the issues that are first and foremost, and then as you work your way down. But we'll expect all of them to be able to cover all those issues within area 2, area 3, and so on. But that's one of the things that we've been concerned about, is making sure that it can be replicated. So any inspector can go in there with minor variations, I suppose, with individuals to make sure that if anybody went into that location or was on that site, that they would find the same violations. So we're going to have to be very consistent across the board. But yeah, that's a great point.
Mayor, if I could just add on, Councilmember Klein, in addition to what Dr. Wagner has stated, residents also have the ability to appeal. If there is a violation that's written, then, and they disagree with it, then they have the appeal process that they can take advantage of as well.
Thank you, Dr. Wagner, for your presentation. I know you're not quite done yet, but this.
Oh, actually I was done, yes.
Oh,
I mean,
all right.
the cats were the last part, so.
Okay, well, very good. So there is a perception within the community. And I'm going to illustrate this perception by telling providing a rather dramatic example. So take House A. It's my understanding that we have within our ordinances that you have to have your address numerals visible from the street.
That's correct.
And I understand the importance of that for our public safety personnel. They need to know where they're going in the event of emergency. So House A, address numerals are obscured. Code compliance folks come by, see that. The perception is that there is then a squadron of folks, compliance officers, descend on this property, issue the notice of violation. The moment it expires, this same squadron returns, cites the resident, and there is a lot of attention placed on this violation. House B next door has been abandoned for 25 years. There's a tree growing through the roof. Bears have taken up residence in the abandoned home and have a nightly jamboree that is rather raucous. And in the perception of residents, that's never been addressed by code enforcement, or code compliance, excuse me. So it feels like that there are times when code compliance focuses on, in the scheme of things, I'm not diminishing any of our codes, focus on relatively minor things, while more egregious, very kind of obvious trees and bears and jamborees are occurring, and that gets little to no attention. Some of this, I think, is perhaps a communication issue. Some of it is the reformations that you and the city manager have discussed, but how do we get at a balance in which things that are relatively minor must be addressed, but we prioritize? That's what this whole day has been about, prioritization. We'd love to do a million things, but how do we prioritize those things that are glaring, that Laughlin, the properties that have been articulated at this level, in other meetings? How do we prioritize those?
That's probably one of the most poignant questions. It goes back to that, making sure we get our point across that the inspector's job is to be consistent and to take care of those sort of discrepancies. Those things shouldn't happen, and I know there have been a few of them. To make sure that those don't happen, and go. I mean, and I'm going to go out with the inspectors on some of their days for half a day, or when I have a chance to see what they do and to see how they go about doing it. But making sure that they're consistent is probably the biggest thing. That's one of the most important aspects of this whole thing, because that has happened. I mean, there have been some things that has been noted that's, in the grand scheme of things, not that big a deal. And yet, 4 doors down, there's a house that's, ready to cave in. Well, that those inconsistencies can't happen. And that's one of the things that we're going to certainly be looking at.
And consistency, certainly, to your point, is an element of it, but it's also a prioritization. And I don't know, I'm not in the field. I'm not skilled enough to be able to articulate how you get to that. But yes, if there, you know, if there's a gutter that's kind of hanging a little bit, that needs to be addressed. But again, there's an abandoned building right
Yeah,
here.
there's
Like,
bigger,
how do
bigger
we
things to
focus
worry
on
about.
that? And then we'll get to the
Sure.
gutter that's.
And
that's-
that's
yeah.
exactly, I think, the way, the approach that we should have. And that's what we're going to want the inspectors to do. It's a great point, and it's one of the things that has kept me up more than one night.
So I have two things. One, it's a no-win situation. I mean, you sit in all these meetings and it easily half the people on this subject complain that there's not enough code enforcement,
Mhm.
and the other half complain that there's too much. So it's a tough position to be in. I know there's certainly been instances for inspectors that have been very challenging. One of the more recent things that I was contacted about was and I guess this gets to the policy of signs being placed in the public right of ways, tree lawns. When an inspector drives by and sees that, is that something that they will pull over and stop? Or do they take the signs out of the public right of way? What's the policy on that? Because most recently there are 3 commercial signs on Hanley right about Teasdale for some contractor. They placed 3 all along the side of the road, and I know a lot of my neighbors don't appreciate those.
Yeah, well, off the top of my head, I'm not sure what the policy is. In the past, inspectors have just gotten out and taken the signs, and they'll take them back to the office. And if we get a call, say, yeah, you can come back, you can get them. You just can't put them back in the right of way.
Okay, thank you.
Honorable Mayor, Councilmember Hales, I think the intention with the restructuring that we're proposing is so that the code compliance officers will take greater ownership of the areas that they have responsibility for. So no longer is it, I see a sign that's, on Delmar, let's just pick a street near North and South. And that sign has been there for several days. And why hasn't a code compliance officer addressed that situation? With the restructuring, it is, why haven't you, code compliance officer, addressed that situation that you have responsibility for? So it's encouraging greater ownership of those areas that they have responsibility for.
Yeah, and the team we have is anxious to get going on this as well. It's a really good bunch.
Part of what I hear with this shift from enforcement to compliance is going to be about communication. And if we thought about that initial notification that any homeowner, business owner, whoever is getting the notice, that the first go round is a notification. It's not a summons. It's not
Correct.
a ticket.
Right.
And it gives them a compliance oriented verbiage that makes them comfortable that they are now part of the process and not they're not our target up for punishment.
Right.
And that punishment's the last resort. It's almost seeing there's going to be 2 systems that are created, a compliance venue and how we work with folks to, if the Bear Jamboree guy calls and says, yeah, I really want to fix this up, but it's going to take me a while. We work with him to get there. So I would hope we can develop that type of communication.
Oh, sure. And we kind of already are doing that in most respects, I think. I mean, if someone calls and said, I'm out of town, my dad's in a hospital, whatever, I'll get to this in a couple of weeks. We'll say, yeah, that's fine. We're not like I said, we're not there to punish you. We're there to work with you to get this done. And particularly on other larger projects, one of the inspectors is really helping this person through to get the house back into compliance. And he's done this with this gentleman in the past. I mean, he's taken it upon himself to say, okay, we'll get you through this, but you need to follow this process.
And yeah, so that initial communication, letting them know that that's there. But of course, keeping the other venue, that's an option if you don't work with us.
Sure,
So please
sure.
work with us. And also now that there's this, we can see it on the map, and I think this is a good time for our communications folks to then This is one of those topics we want to get out ahead of so that folks start to know in section 3, I've got my own compliance officer that may be paying me a visit. And this is what could happen if they come. So that we're already changing, letting them know
Yeah,
before they show up that we've changed.
that's a great point.
So we get ahead of that so that they're ready when it comes in. They can start complaining to us before they even have a visit. I don't like your change to compliance. I liked enforcement, whatever they want to do. That's fine. But I think that kind of communication. Then the third communication, I think, goes with what Mr. Clay said. Lots of folks will tell us, what about that house when you're talking about my street numbers? But they don't know what you did at that house.
Yeah, and we can't really tell them that either. I mean,
Well, I don't know what, yeah, that's what I would have to argue. What's
Yeah.
public information?
yeah,
Is a citation, is a notification, are those public documents where you could say, yeah, we've been there
mhm,
and they're working with us. And so this whole us versus them, as my mom might have said to me, yeah, your room's a mess. It doesn't mean because your brother's yours is still a mess. Clean it up. My brother's mistake didn't help me out at all. So if they point there, okay, yeah, we'll get on them too. And that's a communications issue.
sure.
Of how do you get to them to say, we're on them all and you're just on the list and we'll help you get through this.
Right.
First, let me say, have tremendous respect for our compliance officers. I didn't want my, example to convey anything but that. The second thing is, I think I recall some conversation about an additional code compliance officer for the third ward. Did I dream that up? Did I wish that to be?
No, there was a position in the budget last year that's in the budget, of course, this year as well, that we didn't hire for. I mean, we had some losses in the department. We kind of had some rearranging and we never got around to hiring that particular compliance officer.
That is a part of the plan.
We're hiring one more to replace one of the inspectors that left, and whether we actually take on that additional code compliance, I'll speak with Mr. Rose to see if that's appropriate. Mark thinks we can, and I agree with his assessment. He's really done a lot of thinking and work on this so far, that having it like this will be sufficient with the one floater. If we need the additional code compliance, I'd certainly be happy to. I think we could use that as well. But so I'll speak with Mr. Rose in the budgeting process to see if we actually bring on the seventh person, basically is what it comes down
So
to.
I should look for it there in the
In the third ward.
in the budgeting process,
yeah,
whether or
it would
not
be in
this
the
comes to
budgeting.
fruition.
Correct. And I'll speak with Mr. Rose to see if we continue with that position or not.
Councilmember Clay, I do want to highlight that it won't be a code enforcement officer specifically for the third ward. It will be based upon, if you agree, what we're proposing, the different zones that are going to be created. And as you see, most of them go north to south. So it covers multiple wards.
I had one more question. Will the inspectors rotate, or will they generally stay in
They're
three?
going to rotate.
Okay.
Every 6 months, every year, hasn't been determined, but yes, they would rotate though.
And so how do they manage the cases? Because years ago, that was a huge issue. A citation would be sent, a letter would be sent, and then there was no management of the case, no follow-up. How does it work now?
They do get, some of them do come up. I mean, number one, I'm not entirely sure. It has a lot to do with the software that we're using, MyGov. They do come out and they do follow up with they say, well, you have until, 3 weeks from today to address this particular issue. Then they'll follow up with them. I'm not sure if they actually put something on their own computer to do that, or if anything pops up in MyGov to do that. I know we had talked about another software that was really not going to work before I got here. There may be other software packages that would be beneficial to doing this. And I haven't closed the book on that, but I haven't, I think we can do it with what we have now, but we'll find a way to make it work.
Okay.
And make sure when the day before something is due, that they know that it's due that day before, and they go out and look at it to make sure it's been addressed.
Okay, great. My last comment on this map, and I don't think that there's probably any daylight between any of us up here, is that first district in the Olive Corridor. Olive is a huge challenge, as I think you know,
Correct.
with all the trash. And there are some businesses that are really great about making sure their lot is picked up. And there are many, many more that are not. There's tall grass, there's weeds. And, you know, I think we've all probably gotten comments at some point, why is nothing being done there? And it's like, well, you know, short of putting an orange sticker on the door, you don't know what has or has not been done. But I think that is a really key area of focus, certainly for me moving forward with all of the development to the west, and now about to commence development in the east along Olive, that we really try to get those business owners and property owners to
Right.
comply.
And signs in particular along Olive could use a little scrutinizing, I guess, for lack of a better term.
I just want to back up what Councilmember Hels was talking about in terms of really kind of maybe increasing our accountability to business owners. I think sometimes residents feel frustrated that, you know, they're expected to maintain these standards, and then they, you know, go down the street and they see a business that's just
Exactly.
not taking care of their
It's
property.
consistency. It's a matter of consistency. Yeah.
Yeah. The other comment is just, I think this is a great system. I'm really happy about seeing this system. I think it will really improve the accountability, which I think has been a problem in the code enforcement department. So I appreciate that. Another thing is just, I've had some feedback from elderly people who sometimes don't understand the process. So I think that's something to keep in mind, that,
Sure.
you know, as clear as some communication may be, there may be an element of fear involved where.
And maybe we can, to the extent that we can, rewrite the letters that go out, and some people have said they sound kind of harsh, and most people are fine with it, but maybe taking a spin through the letters that go out, make them more clear, add clarity to it, maybe soften some of the language a little bit.
Yeah. And kind of to follow up on a question that is related to that, is that in the past, there's been some involvement with the police and code enforcement.
Mhm.
And I just kind of want some clarity on, is there a policy with that, or is that just based on what a code enforcer feels at a given time?
I think it's what they feel.
Yeah.
There's some
Yeah.
properties that they are encouraged to go to with the police officer by their side. And I've always told them, I said, if you don't feel safe, then don't do it. Then we'll find a way around it. So it's more of a feel than certainly a policy that, I don't feel good going up there. So why don't we bring somebody with you? I was okay.
Yeah. And I think that's good if there's an understanding and a discussion about it, so that it's not when a officer is in a situation and reacts,
Mhm.
because every time that happens, there's an effect. And there's, it's an effect of trust for the city and trust for the police. So, I just think it's an important discussion, I
Yes.
guess.
Indeed. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if I want to talk about the zones, if I'm hearing you correctly, the movement from enforcement to compliance is a move, as I'm interpreting it, from a transactional to more a relational approach. So
Yeah.
enforcement is your grass is too tall. Here's a citation. You got however many days to fix it. If you don't, here's another one.
Right.
To more relational, hey, your grass is tall. You need to do this, or is there something preventing you from doing this? Is there a way to seek? So more relational. I think to that end, it seems to me, and certainly I defer to the professionals, having folks stay within zones and building familiarity
I thought about that.
with all the dynamics of zone 3. So we know on, I don't know what streets that encompasses in zone 3, but we know on Hanley, Miss Johnson, she has a wild natural garden, and it's going to look a hot mess in April, but come May, it's going to look gorgeous. Someone who's new would cite her in April saying it looks a mess, not realizing in May, it's going to look fantastic. Someone who's been in zone 3 several years, okay, that's Miss Johnson. Yeah, she'll be fine. Give it 2 weeks. It'll look great.
Yeah.
That kind of relational understanding and knowledge of the area, I think, can only really be born by someone who's there consistently.
We've thought about that too. Like, there are drawbacks to having it rotate, because then you do have somebody new. But yeah, the obvious plus of keeping somebody in that zone. Well, I guess they can't get too comfortable, but then they do get to be known in that community and as a more of a helpful person. But also with the flowers, that goes back to the consistency thing. We're going to tell all the inspectors, this is and we're going to actually bring somebody in to talk more about that particular issue, to recognize the native plants like that are going to be taller, that you don't need to do anything with. You don't need to ride them up. You don't need to do anything with them. It's just, they're good to have there. They're all going to say, okay, I can recognize that no matter what zone they're in. But I have thought about that really nice positive aspect that helps the relational part of the whole thing, and it helps build trust.
One more question that I have is, well, actually, it's a 2-part question. What tools are they using actually out there on the street? I mean, are they using just their computer, or is there something that's linked to a system or software? But the other question that I do have is not only what the tools, but would you be willing to use new technology that's out there right now that actually can help you and help the inspectors identify problems and actually, put in an address and then pull up that history and the citations that have been done? Because there is software out there like that, and I've seen it. So
sure. They have access in the, we need to get some new ones, but the ones we have certainly don't owe us anything. The tablets they have access to everything that they have in the office except for a printer. So they do have access to the county records and the records for that particular property. So they have all the tools that they need out there to do what they need to do. And I know all the inspectors and myself are certainly open to better technology that might help us do this better. I'm all for that. And I've identified a couple people give me a call all the time and want me to look at their software and stuff. And there have been a couple that have showed a little bit of promise.
Honorable Mayor Pro Tem had a question regarding what our code enforcement officers are currently doing. I want to make sure that you have responded to that question.
They're not being as consistent as we've talked about, but they, I mean, Jim Blizzard is the animal control officer. He also does housing inspections, so he's one of the ones that would be in one of these zones here, as well as covering animal control, of course. But they do environmental reviews, limbs, grass, that kind of stuff. Signs, certainly they'll look at some signs and write things up. If they see something wrong, they'll address it. But whether they're addressing what needs to be done and prioritizing things, as Councilmember Clay mentioned, I think we need to work on that.
And I think in part the response is that they are more reactive. We get a call, typically that's what happens, and then they'll go out and investigate. The approach that we are proposing would make them more proactive, where they're actually patrolling and identifying violations and working with the residents to come into compliance, not the hammer of citations being issued up front.
Yeah, and I think they would have caught your house up on 78th Street
82nd Street.
82nd Street, sorry. I think it would have caught something like that. And Mr. Rose is right. You always, across public policy, you want to be more proactive than reactive. If you're proactive, you kind of back on your heels and nothing rarely does any good come of that.
But if I could also add a very important component of this is for those that do not have the ability to comply, that are making that decision between fixing a window and eating in some respects, connecting them with resources that would enable them to comply, whether that be SHED or similar organizations. Our interest is not in the enforcement of the codes. It truly is in gaining compliance. And for each resident, that may mean something different.
And-
I also, just one final thing while I want to make sure that we provided you with the list of vacant houses. I think
I did,
that
yes.
information is ready. Okay.
Right. But I want to be more clear about my statement earlier, and that is, I'm not in it. I don't want to blame an inspector for not doing their job. That's not what I'm doing.
Sure.
Because I have an accountability to citizens. And people call and say, why aren't you doing something about this or this situation here? And one of the things that I would like to be able to, and I think Councilmember McMahon mentioned this too, is that I would like to be able to drive down the street, see a house like 1535 82nd Boulevard. And this is just plain junk. It's a junkyard. But I'd like to be able to go to a database or a site on our website and see if that has been cited. That's all. And then I can address that with a citizen, say, yes, they've seen it. It's been reported. And so it's in the hands of our inspectors, because right now I can't. There's no way for me to find out.
And if we're open to new software, one of the ones I've been looking at, you would be able to do just that. Everybody would be able to log in and look at what's going on a particular site or a particular area or something like that.
And I will say one more thing, 1535, this isn't a broken window. This is just junk. And anybody that's up here could drive by there right now and you'll say the same thing.
Mayor, if there are no other questions, then that concludes our presentation.
Dr. Wagner, thank you very much. Is there
Thank you.
anything else on the, John, you were pointing, are we good? Anything else on,
We would have a very quick executive
Correct.
session.
but as far as open, we're concluded.
That's correct.
Okay.
The next step would be to finalize the document and place it on an agenda for your consideration.
With that being said, is there a motion to go into closed session according to Missouri Revised Statute 610.021 legal actions, causes of action, or litigation involving a public governmental body and any confidential or published communications between a public governmental body or its representatives or something. We left off a phrase. Is there such a motion? Motion made by Mr. Hales. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Clay. Is there a discussion? Hearing none. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Klein,
Aye.
Councilmember Smitherson, Councilmember McMahon,
Aye.
Councilmember Hales.
Aye.
Councilmember Clay,
Aye.
Mayor Crowe.
Aye. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm assuming you are going to 2. We're going down to 2. Okay. Thanks.